And Eugene McCann, he's Eugene.
So I'll have a go at it for a while.
No problem.
Thank you. So you're all very welcome to the planning meeting here on the 22nd of June. We have members in the chamber and we have some members online. So we'll try to accommodate everybody. Can any planning member online keep their camera on, if they will, for me? And we'll start off then with our meeting. And I have apologies from Paul Robinson. Is there any further apologies?
Chair, it's Mary here. Hey Thomas. Just Councillor Coyle's logging on. He's just going to be a wee bit late, but he'll be on in the next 15 minutes, I think.
Lovely. Cheers, Mary. Thank you. And no others. Tommy, just get you on here. Yep.
Margaret Carley, August Ganyeri and Towlat, Glucion the Blaine and Shahogan. Thanks very much, Chair, and good luck in the year ahead. Two apologies. Councillor Barry Michael Duff's on Chair's duty, and unfortunately, Councillor Glenn Campbell can't be with us as well, Chair. Margaret, thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Tommy. No other indicating. So we're going to move on then to sign the minutes of the confidential meeting held on the 21st of April and the minutes of the reconvened meeting on the 25th of April. And the confidential minutes and confidential minutes of the previous meeting on the 18th of May. So we'll there for just noting. Okay. Okay. Declaration of interest. No declarations being indicated. So then we're matters arising. There's no matters arising as far as I'm aware. So, okay, we're going to move on then to consider the 4 files for decision by the Plan Committee today. And we're going to start off with application number 1, and that is LA 10 2020 1307/0. Darren will take us.
Okay, good afternoon, members. If I could just bring members' attention to an email, just if I could. Paper B application number 4, LA 10 2021 0042. It's for the application by Francis McKnight for the retention of the farm building at Derry Bard Road in Fintna. It is, I had intended to present it later on, members, but an email has come in from the agent just advising that he's on holiday and he's unable to attend the meeting today. And he has never missed a planning committee meeting, and the applicant is not in a position to represent herself. In light of this, would ask for deferral to the next available date, and that would be July, members. So it's a request to defer that application until July, so the agent can attend. If we could consider that, maybe, members.
Yeah, thanks, Darren. And
thanks very much, Chair. Thomas, I look forward to your year in the chair. I know you'll do an effective job. We'll try and bolster you up where need be, and then you can knock us down.
And not at all. Cooperation's the name.
Cooperation and whatever we need. Look, I know normally don't do it, but I think in the spirit of cooperation, I'll propose a deferral.
Okay, cheers, Robert.
For a suitable period of time.
Okay. And Earl.
Thank you very much, Chair, and can I take this opportunity to wish you all the very best for the year ahead as well. And I'll second Councillor Irvine's proposal for the deferral. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And Alan.
Okay, congratulations, Chair, and I just want to add my support.
Okay, thank you. And Josephine.
Thank you, Chair, and may I too offer you my best wishes for the year ahead as Chair of Planning. I just want to offer my support for the deferral, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, so we're all agreed. Okay, thank you.
Okay, just to confirm, members in, so the application in Paper B, application 4, LA 10 2021 0042 has been deferred until the July meeting.
Okay. Thanks, sir. So you're going to take us through application number 1 then?
So paper A then, application number 1 reference LA 10 2020-1307. It's an outline application by F. Logan for 6 dwellings, 2 detached and 2 pairs of semis, previously approved under LA 10 2016-0078 on lands northwest of number 1 St. Dimnus Road, Dromore. Recommendation is to approve planning permission for the reasons listed within the report and subject to the 10 conditions. Just to advise members before we go through the presentation, so it's for 6 houses in the limits of Dromore and is essentially renewal of a previous permission. The layout is slightly larger and denser than the surrounding character, but is acceptable, and the history is given significant weight. Consultees are largely content with the application. Some additional information has been requested by them, but officers have declined to obtain that for the reasons listed within the report. You'll note from the report the application is a local application and is brought before the members as it attracts material objections from a consultee, namely NI Water. An officer's recommendation is to approve planning permission subject to conditions. So a decision like that requires a committee decision and can't be one made by officers. So the application then, members, is put on the screen. So the site location plan then is on the screen. It's just hard to make out, members, but the site's up in the top left of the slide. And I'll go on and so that's a zoomed in visual impression of it. So you can see the site then along St. Dimnus Road, outlined in red, adjacent to the church and the day centre with houses directly opposite it. And then that's a photograph then just looking into the site, so you can see the location of the field beside the road and the other buildings then nearby. And then the plan, although it's an outline application, it does include an indicative plan which shows the location of the houses, and you can see the 2 detached houses at the front and then the 2 pairs of semis in round the back, accessed by a single entrance out onto the road. Critical views then, members, if you imagine you're standing at the yellow star looking down St. Dimnus Road towards the application site, that's the view there, and the site then is just beside that van and the barn then in the middle of the screen. Important consideration then, members, is the cross sections and the impact upon the nearby list of buildings. Levels have been provided, so there's several cross sections through the site. And that's the listed building that's nearby. You can see the blue star then is the location of the listed school. And that's the buildings then that are adjacent to the site. So, members, the recommendation is to approve planning permission for the reasons listed within the report and subject to 10 conditions.
Okay. Thanks very much, Darren. And we have Mr. Richard Collins then. Richard, you can hear us, can you?
Yes, I can hear you loud and clear. Can you see and hear me?
Yes. You have
Excellent.
10 minutes, Richard, at your own time there, please.
Okay. Well, first of all, I'd like to thank the committee for obviously giving me the opportunity to speak, and to also then refer to what Darren has just explained as being the planning position. Obviously, we welcome the renewal of this lapsed approval. The history being that it was applicant driven some time ago. The approval was sought and given for the 6 houses as an outline, not a full application. And subsequently, regrettably, the original applicant has died. So this is actually part of an estate issue. And we made obviously a straightforward, what we thought a straightforward renewal application for the outline. As Darren has quite rightly pointed out, the largest problem to do with the application appears to be the Northern Ireland water position. I suppose what I want to just explain is it highlights a much wider and damning issue for everybody here on this side of the sector. With very few exceptions, virtually every application that we submit to planning, and especially for full, comes back with a negative response to the Northern Ireland water. Their position in this last maybe 12 months has been literally no capacity. Now, whether that's a village, a hamlet, a town, a city, it's the same across the province. There are obviously some exceptions where you have recently renovated and upgraded treatment works. For instance, Lack has got the ability to take 100 houses or possibly maybe slightly less than that. But in the Oma area, for instance, we make applications even for a single house, and the storm and the foul are literally outside the front gate. It comes back as refusal based on the fact of lack of capacity. Now, that's lack of capacity for sewage. for stormwater, and also now beginning to creep in is mains water. So this particular application that's in front of you today, which Darren has gone through, and yes, recommended for refusal, with the condition obviously that if it proceeds to reserve matters, then the issue of sewage, stormwater, that have to be resolved to the satisfaction of all departments. The difficulty, of course, is that NI Water, regardless of whether you go in with a PDE, as they call it, which is an initial application to find out if there is capacity, it comes back negatively. If we do an application, it's the same process, it comes back negatively. And the difficulty is there's very, very few options to actually go forward with any plan application whenever it is such a seismic no. One resolution, of course, is to put in packaged plants if it's for houses. We'll give you a very quick example. I know I've only got 10 minutes here. Commercial application in Belfast. We had a site with a sewer running through it, but the stormwater was outside the site. We applied for a modest unit to be built on it and site works. We were refused access to the storm for lack of capacity, and we were refused then for the file. We had to engage outside consultants, which virtually we're having to bring into virtually every application. They were able to prove that the rate of flow, for instance, from stormwater for that site into this drainage channel for storm could be achieved if attenuation tanks were put in. Suddenly we were looking at £300,000 of underground tanks to try and regulate the amount of water that was going from the site into the storm. Now, it's indicative of Belfast, yes, where there's obviously a high density of construction, but it's the same principles apply across the land, and especially in Fermanagh and Omagh. We got into the sewer because there was already an existing connection. But the point being, we had to employ outside consultants, and we really literally had to hold our breath to see whether we would actually get connections. And without the connections, the project would have failed. So the situation we find ourselves in now, especially in the Omagh area, is that any small or medium or large housing development that's applied for is hitting a brick wall. Northern Ireland Water are saying no capacity. They're saying carry out impact water assessments. You bring in consultants, you spend thousands of pounds submitting them, and they come back with exactly the same answer. So they're pushing down the road then of alternatives. And when it comes to an alternative for sewage, obviously packaged plants, you have them for single houses, you can also get them for multiple houses, you can even get them for industrial sites. But the difficulty is that the end effluent still cannot go into the public system, even though the pipes are lying outside in the roadway, outside the site. So you've then got the added problem of trying to find somewhere to actually put your stormwater effluent and your sewage effluent after it's been treated. Plus then the sewage effluent has to be handled in a particular way, which is to adoptable standards by NIW. So really where we're heading with this is the NIW are now putting pressure on developers to create the infrastructure required to satisfy the NIEA, who are all about water quality and whatever goes into the rivers, etc. So what I'm sort of indicating is that there's a lot of severe problems, and we are reaching the stage where the planning office are really looking at these applications and wondering, can we actually even approve them based on this vociferous no coming from NIW? Now, I say, in fairness, NIW are not there as the enemy. They're there as a team. Perhaps they feel they're on the periphery of this, but it is incumbent upon everyone within this industry to try and negotiate some way forward with NIW with regard to their infrastructure. Everything's there. The pipeworks are there. The treatment works. If it's a lack of capacity, it means they have to be upgraded. So what I would suggest possibly is that committee, along with planners, should meet with the Northern Ireland Water, because we are now beginning to come into the end of the funnel. We literally could find applications and developments across this province stalling, being frozen, or indeed applications not made because there's no prospect of getting them through. I do believe it's a temporary problem. I know that Northern Ireland Water are working hard at this, but obviously they're looking for funds. And to some degree, we're being caught in the middle, or not just ourselves, but obviously the developers. And if there are solutions, and in many cases there are complicated solutions which take time and money, invariably what happens is that those costs get pushed onto the price of these buildings. And so you find somebody in the public normally has to pay for them. So sorry, it's not a rant. It's just maybe a point of view with the backdrop of this particular application. But I hope you don't mind me taking the time out to mention that.
No, absolutely not, Richard. It's something we're aware of and we continue to lobby on. And From what you're saying there, sounds to be getting worse all the time. So,
Well, I mean, it's across the board. It's not just for Manahoma has the problem. It's in every district that we work in, and it's becoming more and more complex and more difficult because planners obviously want to progress these applications, but it's going to take this sort of approach from Darren and the team to maybe try to get the thing moved forward. I mean, there are still problems ahead with this application. There'll be problems ahead with any applications that's approved with negativity when it comes to NIW. But it's just to let you know, it is a real live and ever-growing problem.
yep. Okay. Have we any questions, John?
Sorry, obviously I'm maybe not on the panel as long as some of the other councillors. The officers are recommending that we approve this planning permission,
Yes.
and you as the agent are pointing out to what's going to cause problems. Now, we, as far as I can see, and some of my colleagues may correct me, we can pass it at this stage.
Yes.
But with NI Water, that's something that this council and sewage works is something that we've been ongoing in other areas for quite a while, and that while it's going to be a problem that you're going to have to address or come up with problems, or how you address it. I can't see them addressing the problems for an extra 6 houses in Drumore if they say they've no capacity. I'm not sure what they're telling us. They don't have the money to do that, so I'd be interested to hear what you have to say. You know, how you think we can, what pressures we can bring to play on them that we haven't already done so.
Well, the infrastructure, for instance, in this application is available. I mean, the treatment works for the village are actually just opposite the site. The pipe work is in the road opposite the site. Now, there are a number of solutions, and you must remember this is an outline application. It's by no means detailed enough to go forward for development. That has to come at reserve matters stage. And there are a number of different types of approaches you can make. You can, for instance, do a package treatment plant on the site, and which will cater for whatever number of houses are finally applied for under reserve matters. That there then can be adopted. It just so happens there is a live stream stroke river running down the side of the site, so you have your discharge point. Now, for that to proceed, you've obviously got to engage with Rivers Agency, who control access to the watercourse. You then have to get permission from the NIEA for the type of effluent you wish to put into it. Now, the treatment plants we're talking about today are considerably different from where they were even 10 years ago. And theoretically, the effluent coming out of these is so poor, it is, well, they say it's drinkable, but nobody's ever really tested that. So in this instance, there are clear sort of solutions for anyone that takes this application forward to development. In terms of what you can bring ask the NIW to do is obviously look at their capacities. I mean, they give us the opportunity, for instance, on much more significant or intense schemes to carry out water impact assessments. Now, these are carried out not by ourselves, but by specialist consultants, and they normally cost considerable thousands to put in. Now, it is possible through that through analysis that NIW can actually reverse the decision and say, well, actually, in fact, there is capacity. I mean, this is not an unusual thing. What I'm saying is initially, because they are a very small network of people, they are completely overloaded with applications. And I mean, we deal with them on a regular basis, and they're very decent people to work with, and they do their very best. They're not sitting behind some castle sort of wall being protected. I mean, they're out there doing their best, but they do not have the manpower. And sometimes they ask the private sector to carry out the analysis to make sure, or to ensure that they're given the correct information. But what I'm saying is just virtually a generic no to everything, and then it's back to us to try and sort of work our way through it.
Yeah. Okay. Robert?
Thanks very much, Richard. Look, I'm not going to prolong the discussion. You've made your points. I think I would, like to thank you for making the points, because it's now a matter of record. So from that point of view, that's good. Look, from a practical point of view, our planners are advising approval. The issue with regard to the detailing at reserve matter stage is 3 years down the line minimum. So whoever takes it on will take the baton up. We would hope that we will have lobbied and the situation would have changed. So I
That's
don't
highly, that's
expect,
highly likely to be correct.
I don't need a reply, Richard. I'm just making a statement. And with that, actually, I'm happy enough to approve, to go straight to approval, Chair.
Okay, thanks, Robert. Earl?
Thank you very much, Chair, and thanks to Richard for his presentation. And Richard, the points have been well noted here again, and obviously it's something to be well aware of. But however, what Councillor Irvine has just said there, I'm happy enough to second an approval. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Earl. And Josephine?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And just to thank Mr. Collins again for making his point so clearly and succinctly. And it certainly is a matter of concern for us as a planning committee. And we certainly do not want to see any developments stymied because of lack of water capacity. But I think the issue has been well covered, and happy to support the approval, Chair. Thank you.
Thanks, Josephine. And Anthony? you're-
Thanks, Chair. Just want to apologise for being late, Chair. The customs were stopping out the road and pulling me in. Anybody in a wee van. Just it held me up. I was cut it fading off. So just I know I can't vote on it, but just any of them towns that the sewers at capacity. Just want to be careful there. Like I know there's Helen and Garrison. I just want to say that. So sorry for being late, Tom. Not my fault.
Okay. Richard, at this stage, thank you very much for your contribution here, and thank you for raising those points officially now in the planning committee here. So thank you.
No, thank you very much.
Okay, members, we have the proposal on the table, so I'm just going to ask if you, Darren, you're happy enough there. So are we all agreed? Okay. Thank you very much.
So the application, members, was recommended for approval for the reasons listed within the report and subject to 10 conditions. Members have granted permission for the development subject to those conditions.
Okay. Thank you very much. Okay, we're moving on to application number 2 then. That's LA 10 2020 0366F.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon, members. So application number 2 is LA 10 2020 0366. This is 32 number dwellings at lands at 131 Castletown Road and 18 Duntague Road, Mountjoy. And the applicant is JJAK Properties Limited. And the recommendation is to approve planning permission, the reasons listed in the report, and subject to 16 conditions.
Okay. So.
Okay, so so the application site is in the village of Mountjoy, and the star indicates the site. It's directly opposite the Presbyterian Church, and this current land is just a green field. Previously would have had trees and shrubs and scrub in it, and to the top right-hand corner of the plan, you'll see an area where there used to be an old filling station, with a shop and a number of buildings. They've since been removed, and the application was submitted after these buildings had been removed. So this is a view that we have along Castletown Road. So you can see the Presbyterian Church to the left-hand side, and the site's into the right. So it's bounded to its rear by large, mature, deciduous trees, and the site's quite open to the public road. But again, this is within the settlement limits of Mountjoy. This particular view is travelling along the Mountjoy Avenue Road, which is the main road from, which is the main route from the Derry Road into Mountjoy. So the Presbyterian Church is here on your left-hand side, and again you can see the site. So the site's reasonably flat in terms of its topography. there's not any serious challenges in terms of levels. So that's that main view. Okay. This next view is again along Castletown Road. So the Presbyterian Church is to the right-hand side. You can see the car parking areas. So to the left is the site. So it appears to have been left in a position to be developed. Previous images that we would have had dating back to 2010, 2011 would have shown the site not in grassland, but just heavily vegetated. And there appears to be some works carried out to try and make it ready for development. This next view now that's coming up shows the petrol station that maybe people in the area might know that has since been demolished. I think there was a shop there called O'Doherty's. It seems to have been abandoned many years before it was demolished. So that's the current state of the site. And the proposal that we have in front of us proposes 32 units. And it's making the most of the site that we have. As I said, it's quite flat. The topography is really good. The proposal, you'll note, has 2 access points. So there's one access point opposite Mountjoy Presbyterian Church. So that's the right-hand side of the block plan. And then the other access point is where the old petrol station would have been, which is to the north of the site. Also on this plan, you can see circled in yellow, that is the line of deciduous trees, which is actually the buffer zone between the limits of development within Mountjoy and the rural remainder, which is beyond that point. This next plan shows you the landscaping proposal. So again, it probably just makes it seem more real when you see the levels of vegetation that they're proposing to put in between the properties. Again, the buffer zone is there on the outside, and there's a number of properties which are close by. So to the bottom corner of the screen, there's 2 properties, 2 semi-detached properties, or a pair of semis, and then to the north west, there's another property, and all properties have been consulted, and there's been no representations have been received. So that's all I have to say at this stage.
Okay. Thank you very much. And we have.
Oh, sorry. I'll just continue on a wee bit. Sorry, I had a few more slides.
Okay.
Again, just this doesn't indicate all of the houses within the proposal, but there's a mixture of semi-detached and detached. So this is a sample of some of the semis. The next one is a detached house, and the last house we have is a bungalow. So they're all modest-sized dwellings. They're all bespoke really in design. They're not maybe the usual that you would find in a settlement like Oma or in a Skillen. So given the Presbyterian Church, which is listed to the side of the road, the design of these dwellings is really suitable in terms of what we would be looking for on a site like that. So, sorry, the recommendation is obviously to approve permission subject to the 16 reasons.
Okay, thank you very much. Earl?
Thank you, Chair. And I suppose I've no particular questions. And I know this site, and I know the sort of the background of it. If we're allowed to go to recommendation, I'm happy to propose a recommendation as listed with the conditions attached.
Okay, Chair Cheryl, thank you. Alan?
Well, Chairman, likewise, I am very happy to second that. It's a much sought after area. I enjoy, and I know the site very well, and certainly it'll be what you call a betterment, improvement for the site. The condition it was in was really, and could be described almost as an eyesore, not what you'd want in Mountjoy area. So I've got pleasure in seconding that.
So, Josephine?
Thank you, Chair, and just to thank Martin for his very comprehensive report. And I too am in support of this approval, Chair. I'm particularly pleased that the design of the building is in keeping with the surrounded listed building, the Presbyterian Church, and I think will add considerably to what is really quite a picturesque hamlet of Mountjoy. So happy to support the approval, Chair. Thank you.
Okay. Members, we have it proposed and seconded. Are we in agreement? Okay. Martin, do you want
Yep.
to?
Okay, members. So application L 2010-2020 0366, a full application for housing in Mountjoy, was recommended for approval by planning officers. Members have granted approval for the reasons listed within the report and subject to the 16 conditions.
Okay. Thank you very much. Okay, we're going to move on to application number 3. That's LA 10 2022 0506.
So application 3 then, LA 10 2022 0506. It's a listed building consent application by the council for a proposed handcrafted ceramic panel to be located on the town hall in Enniskillen. And the recommendation then is to approve listed building consent for the reasons listed within the report and subject to the 2 conditions. So I'm sure members know the town hall well, but just as a site location plan. And the ceramic panel then is to be positioned on the side of the wall where the yellow star is, just the steps. So it'll be sited then and affixed to the wall. And that's in the, there's a delay, members. Yeah, so that's the panel then that's going to be put onto the wall. They're bespoke and individual for each location throughout the town. This one is Water Lane. It's approximately 75 centimeters by 45, and you can see the details then. It's powder coated with a dark grey steel frame. So the recommendation then, members, is to approve list of building consent. The reasons listed within the report and subject to 2 conditions.
Okay. Thanks, Darren. Robert?
Thanks very much, Tom. Happy to propose the approval of this. This is just part of a variety of works going around the town, and I think they're well in keeping with the character and layout of Enniskillen, and they will just add further and enhance basically the walking trail around the town and give our visitors and tourists more to actually see and look at. So it's be welcome. So thanks very much. It's an approval.
Okay, cheers, Robert. Earl?
Yeah, thanks again, Chair, and I want to second Councillor Irvine's proposal for approval. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Earl. And members, we have it proposed and seconded. Are we all in agreement? Okay, thank you. Darren, do you want to sum up?
So, members, so the application for listed building consent, LA 10 2022 0506 LBC, was recommended for approval by officers. Members have granted listed building consent for the reasons listed within the report and subject to 2 conditions.
Okay. Going to move on to application number 4, and that's LA 10 2022 0507.
Yes, members, so another one of the hand ceramic panels. So LA 10 2022 0507 LBC, application by the council for listed building consent for a proposed handcrafted ceramic panel, and this one's on McGee Spirit Store in East Bridge Street. Again, members, just the site location ends on the screen. The recommendation then is to approve listed building consent for the reasons listed within the report and subject to the 2 conditions. That's just an image, members, on the screen then of the position of this panel. So it'll be where the yellow star is in that location in Bridge Place. And the panel then is McGee's Yard. Again, same size, similar finishes to the previous one, 75 centimeters by 45 centimeters. And the recommendation then is to approve list of building consent for the reasons listed within the report and subject to 2 conditions.
Yeah, thanks, Darren. And Robert?
Yeah, for the same reasons again, Chair Tom, I'm happy to propose the approval of this application. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And Darren?
Thank you again, Chair, and happy to second Councillor Irvine's proposal for approval.
Okay, thanks, Aaron. Members, we have it proposed and seconded. Are we all in agreement? Okay, thank you.
So application LA 10 2022-0507 for list of building consent. The recommendation was to approve list of building consent. Members have granted the consent subject to the two conditions as per the report.
Okay. Thank you. Moving on then to application number 1 then, and this is LA 10 2021 and it's 0388.
Members, just give me a second to bring the slide up.
That's okay. Robert?
Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to butt in basically in front of Darren. We had a similar application coming forward about 18 months ago, and it was extremely useful where we actually went out and site, and it's something we don't normally do. But I think in this instance, I would like to defer the discussion on this and propose a suitably agreed date for a site visit to go up and look at this. So that's my proposal, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Robert. And Tommy?
Thank you, Carly, thanks, Chair. Yeah, similar to Robert, I think the site meeting was very beneficial at a similar application previously, so I would be supportive of a site meeting, Chair.
Okay, I have it proposed and seconded that we defer and hold a suitably agreed time site meeting. Are we all agreed? Okay. Thank you.
Okay, members, so just
Darren?
paper B then, application number 1, LA 10 2021-0388F was a full application by C. Murray at Hillview Road. The recommendation then was to approve planning permission for the reasons listed within the report and subject to 3 conditions. Members have agreed that the application shall be deferred to allow a site visit to occur. So the application will then be brought back to the next available committee after the site visit.
Okay, thank you. Okay, going to go on to application 2, and this is LA 10 2021 1135.
Okay, members, so second application, then application number 2, LA 10 2021 1135, proposed 2-story dwelling house adjacent and 10 metres south of 12 Homeview Mews in Oma, and the applicant then is B. Toll. The recommendation is to refuse planning permission for the reasons listed within the report and subject to the 2 reasons. So the proposal then, members, is a 2-bedroom dwelling just off the Campsie Road in Oma with an area of amenity space aside. The new house is in very close proximity to existing terrace of houses and will result in a loss of light and overshadowing of these houses. It's not considered by officers to be a quality residential development, which will adversely affect the amenities of neighbours. Members are also asked to note the comments within the report about the flood zone and also the NI water issues that are raised throughout the consultation with them. In terms of the application details then, members, on the screen is the site location plan. The site is outlined in red. It's hard to spot on the screen, members, but it's adjacent to the blue arrow. So I just zoomed in on that to allow an easier reference. So the left-hand slide then is the location of the building and the site outlined in red. And you can see a rectangular shaped plot adjacent to Homeview Mews. And the site then is identified in red, as I say. The right-hand slide then is just that that image zoomed in a bit further, members, to let you see the location of the building and its relationship to the other buildings. We take that block plan then and overlay that onto the other images and other information that we have. So the left-hand slide then is the What's My Address website, and that just shows the location of the site, which is a red rectangle beside the yellow star. So the location of that site to the other houses in the area. So you can see it's adjacent to the blue line, which is the pedestrian link through. And then you have the terrace of houses, number 3 all the way through to 11. You also then have number 12, which is to the north of our site, and number 14 to the south. And they also then the position of the other houses and buildings in the area. The right-hand side slide then shows the aerial image looking down onto the application site, which is outlined in red, and you can see then the blue arrow is the pedestrian link and the terrace then of houses immediately adjacent to that. The proposal then, as I say, members, is a 2-bedroom, 2-story house ground floor plan on the left-hand side with the access coming in off the pedestrian walkway into a hall. You then have the living room, kitchen and utility on the ground floor with the stairs then up to the 2 bedrooms and the bathroom upstairs. You'll note, members, the windows then, location of the windows on the property. As you can see, the ground floor, you have utility on one side and a kitchen and living room on the other. And on the first floor, you then have the windows on 3 sides. So the front elevation then, so I'll just take you through these, members. The right-hand slide will be the block plan, and I'll give you an idea of the orientation of the building on the site. So if we're standing in the pedestrian home view mews, looking at the front of the building, that's the front elevation then on the left-hand side. So you can see the doorway coming in and the 2 windows. If you're then at the top left of the building, so you're at the top of the site looking at the side elevation, and that's the slide on the left. The other elevation then, so you're in the bottom right of the building, you can see then the elevation facing towards the garden area, and then the rear elevation facing onto the back of the site. Again, members, just to give you some images of where that building or the proposed building sits in relationship to the other houses. So again, the left-hand slide is the addresses of the nearby properties, and the right-hand side was the aerial image. And that's the front of the houses directly opposite. So if we just go back there, members, so you can see houses 3 to 11, adjacent to the blue arrow. Our site is opposite number 7 and 8. And that's a photograph then of that terrace. The back of that terrace then, so those properties that you can see in front of you, members, if you go behind them and at the back of those, that's the terrace then, the right-hand side with the satellite dish on it. And you can see then there's an area of rough ground before there's another terrace immediately beside that on the other side. Those houses back to back onto each other. So if you imagine, members, again, you're standing at the yellow star at the bottom of the slide, looking up from Home View Avenue. That's the view then. You can see the terrace then on the left-hand side, number 11, beside the cars, and the pedestrian link then up through to the County Road. You then have the buildings then approved with a blue star. There's 2 flats or apartments there. That's just as you walk up closer to the Home View mews. Our site then is on the right-hand side. And if you turn around and immediately look behind you, members, at number 14, that's the back of it. So you can see the windows in the balcony area there. And that's just walking back on yourself, looking at number 14 again. And that's number 14 again. The top of the site then is number 12, and that's another block of apartments with the windows overlooking our application site. So there is planning history on the site, members, as you'll note from the report. So under K95 0716, there was an application for 3 2-story dwellings. The original plans then are on the slide in front of you. Quite difficult to make out the slide on the left, members. So on the right-hand side, the mews is identified by the blue rectangle, and the applicant applied for 3 units then, 1, 2 and 3 as listed and shown on the screen. That was subsequently amended, and the slide then on the screen now was approved. So you can see the plans were changed and the applicant now was granted approval for 3 units, but they were spaced out with 2 areas of green space directly opposite the Home View mews. Now it's a 1995 approval, so it's a historical one, and we don't have full details of why there was a change or what happened, but from a planning perspective, I can understand why the initial plans were rejected and the amendments were proposed and approved, because they allow the green space to be retained directly in front of the houses. So the issues before you, members, then, that the development will not create a quality and sustainable residential environment, and it will adversely affect the amenities of the neighbours. So I'll just go through the 4 issues then. So you're overlooking the properties number 7 and 8 directly opposite the site, and then number 14 at the bottom of the site. You also have loss of light and overshadowing to number 7 and 8, and number 12 at the top of the site. And then the final reason is that there's no private open space as an integral part of the development. There is open space proposed, but it's completely overlooked by all of the surrounding properties, and there's no privacy at all. As I say, the guidance and the planning policy would encourage some degree of privacy for private amenity space, despite its central location within the town. So the recommendation then is to refuse permission for the 2 reasons, members, and those are included within the report.
Okay, thank you very much, Darren. And we have speaker rights now by the planning agent, Eugene McCann, and the applicant, Mr. Toll. Can you hear us?
I can, Chairman.
Yep.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you loud and clear. So you're very welcome to the Planning Committee, and you have between you 10 minutes. You can break that up as you see fit, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Chairman, and good afternoon. This is a new experience for me. I've never done one of these calls before, so forgive me if I don't get it completely right. The application was reviewed. We put this application in, and we looked at what was surrounding the development. Now, you have a terrace, as Darren has pointed out, and I'm going to point it out again. You have a terrace of houses along Homeview Mews, and you also have a terrace of houses along Homeview View Avenue. So in between there, you have open space. And that open space, I would assume, would have been left for amenity space. Now, interestingly, there are no back doors on any of these houses. So therefore, there is no amenity space to the houses, the terrace of houses on Homeview Mews, or the terrace of houses on Homeview Avenue. There is no amenity space. The space that you see in between these 2 terraces is completely derelict. So there's no amenity space there. They're existing, but obviously they were approved at some stage. Darren would probably argue they were approved long before creating places. But I'll continue. The department, in the second sentence of their recommendation for refusal, they say that the principle of a new house is acceptable and the design is in keeping with the local character. And the department also states that development is acceptable on page 4, paragraph 7 of the recommendations. So I don't know whether there's a contradiction there or not. Maybe I'm interpreting it wrong, but one part they're saying it's acceptable, the other part they're saying it's not. The houses, as I say, the houses between Homeview Avenue and Homeview Mews, there's no garden space, no amenity space, and most don't even have access to the rear because they don't have a back door. There are 3 windows. I'll just go to the other point. There are 3 windows on the first floor, 2 to the bedroom windows, which overlook the double garden. So that there's a back-to-back garden there. So there's more than an adequate separation between the proposal and house number 16. If you looked at the location map, house number 16 has a minute garden. It measures 2.9 meters. So it is very, very small. The gardens that I'm proposing are 3 times with that, and there's no complaints from that tenant. That tenant's quite happy. There are no complaints from any of the tenants on this development. There are no representations and no objections. So I don't know whether, if there were objections to this development, they would be taken on board by the department. There are no objections. Doesn't seem to carry any weight at all. Don't know why that is. But on the point of the windows, I think that's a complete red herring. I can move the windows wherever the department want them to be moved. The 2 bedroom windows overlook the double garden. The single garden is overlooked by a bathroom window. And we all know, well, most of us have translucent glass in the bedroom and a bathroom window. So I will contest there's no overlook into that garden. The 2 windows on the first floor of the proposal looking towards house 14, you have a double garden. I don't see what the problem is. Also, in any situation, and I've looked right through Campsie, particularly, right through Campsie, there is overlooking everywhere. So I can't see the argument. Now, as regards the light, well, the sun moves around these houses from east to the west, and it follows a solar track. So when the sun is at noon, it casts a shaft straight up through Homeview Mews. Loads of light. Can't see what the issue is there. But this terrace house that we're proposing is the narrowest possible elevation. So you're going to get morning sun from the east. You're going to get afternoon sun from the southwest. I can't see what the problem is. Can't see what the problem. But if the the department wanted to move windows, or sorry, the council wanted to move windows, that's not a problem. We can do that. I should point out at this stage to the council that there have been no objections. I'll say that again. There are no objections to the development. The issue with the windows, well, I've covered that. I'd have to ask the question then, if this is, and it's been mentioned on the recommendation for review, if this is town cramming, then somebody would have to explain to me the development of flats adjacent to this site, application LA 10 2019 1471F. They have absolutely no amenity space. There are windows overlooking. Doesn't seem to be a problem. And there's another application further down behind number 29, Campsie Road, LA 10 2017 0345F. Again, no amenity space. There is another development, a large-scale development ongoing with 24 two-bedroom flats, and they definitely have less. It needs to be looked at. They have less amenity space than our application. That is LA 10 2019 0313, and it's a renewal of K 2015 0141 RM. So the above applications were approved under creating places. So there didn't seem to be an issue there. That's about all I have to say, the committee members. I hope that you can support this application, because I think the proposal is a decent proposal. Incidentally, the space between the houses in Homeview Mews, that alleyway, measures 3.5 meters, more than adequate. This is a low elevation house, and it's got a low pitch, so your light will come in at 30 degrees. So these houses in summertime, when the sun is high in the sky, there's not a problem with the light getting in. Okay, there might be less light in the winter, but I think you'll all agree there's less light in the winter time. Anyway, I think that's all I have to say, councillors. Thank you very much, Chairman, for the opportunity to speak.
Okay, you're very welcome. And Mr. Toll, do you want to add? You have about 3 minutes.
Good afternoon, Chairman and councillors. I would like to say really that this modest development, given what has been currently developed adjacent to the site, is put forward there. I have also spoken with my tenants down there and explained, they're on either side of this, and explained the development proposals. And they've indicated to me that they would have no objections for this proposal. They also indicated that they have spoken to some of their neighbours about the development, and there's been no objections, and there were no objections. And also, just to elaborate what you've been said there, the windows can be altered, and that's not a problem. And we've looked, and as the sun moves around this house, the neighbouring properties will get enough sunshine, in our opinion. That's all I can say here now. Is made the case for the approval with minor adjustments, whatever they may be. Listen, thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Toll. And now I'm going to see if any members have any questions for either Mr. McCann or Mr. Toll. No, there doesn't seem to be any questions. So thank you very much for your contribution. And we have representation now by Councillor McCann and Councillor Wilson, and you have 5 minutes there. Allocate as you wish. And
okay, thank you, Chair. If you're happy, I'll proceed quickly if you wish. Chair, congratulations and best wishes for your time ahead as Chair of this committee, and I look forward to working with you over the coming year. From listening to and viewing the officer's representation, or presentation I should say, this proposal fits broadly to what is currently in place in this area. This particular area of Omagh can be best described as being densely populated. would be the prevailing characteristic of this immediate area. Now, the agent has referred to this, and I note that this application has generated no objections from neighbours, and this is quite significant given some of the concerns that our planning officials have raised. The statutory consultees have provided some feedback in relation to this application, and again, there's no issues raised which can't be overcome, which are they're not insurmountable. I note the comments provided by NI Water, and I also note the earlier comments from Mr. Collins in respect to the previous application, and this does create some concern, I suppose, in terms of future development in our area going forward. So just to note that, I see that NI Water have provided comment on this one as well. So just following on from the agent's comments and the applicant's comments, I feel the officer's concerns in relation to this application can be overcome and approval can be given and creating much needed housing in this area. That's all, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Stephen. Bert?
Chair, yes, congratulations, and hopefully a good year that we get things sorted out. Yeah, I believe that if we look at the drawing on that, the dwelling on that site is really only about a third of the site area, and if we look across at number 12. Would it not be, if what we're saying is correct, would it not be overshading number 3 and number 4? And they have all been approved. I'm not going to repeat a lot of things that other ones have said, but I would have thought that there is a proposal here for obscure glass. I would have thought, I'm sure the applicant would be agreeable for, in some case, if a window needs to be moved or built up, that would be possible. There is a need for, in most towns, and especially Oma, for new dwellings. And I believe that this site would fit into that area reasonably well, with some tweaks and that. But it's as I say, the garden there on each side of it is joining with the gardens of the other two houses and leaves really quite an area there with no construction at all. And I would ask that there has been no objections to it, and I'm quite sure that the neighbours were all notified. So I would suggest that with a few alterations that this could be granted an approval. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thanks, Bert. And now I'm going to ask Darren.
No, members, happy to take questions. Just in relation to some of the histories of the nearby approvals that were referred to, that's new information. So that wasn't raised previously with me, which is why it's not in the report. However, those would be considered on their merits against the policy and would have been found to meet the policy tests. But again, it just shows how we have to, as a council, be careful when we approve development that it meets planning policy, because it will be thrown back at us in the future. But no, happy to take questions.
Okay. And Josephine?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Darren, for your report, and to the applicant, agent and councillors for their further information. Now, it's been stated that concerns and objections expressed by statutory consultees can be overcome. First of all, Chair, could I ask for a comment from the planning officer regarding the sewage drainage, and also then the fact that this development is proposed in a floodplain? Thank you.
Yeah, member, so happy to refer to the report, member, on that really, under the flooding issue, PBS 15, planning and flood risk, it goes through that, and the land there is within an area that's identified as a flood zone from the rivers flood maps. However, officers take the view that the site would be a defended floodplain, so therefore it would be acceptable to develop on the site. That has been a widespread approach throughout this area of Campsie, in particular, where development has been permitted despite it being in the flood zone. In relation to NI Water, yes, they are coming back saying, similar to the first application, that the public system cannot presently serve this development proposal without significant risk of environmental harm and public disamenity, including pollution, flooding, and detrimental impact on existing properties. They have no plans within their current investment cycle to upgrade the sewage system. and is recommending connections to the system is curtailed. So same issues as the first one. However, officers would be of the view that a planning condition, a negatively worded planning condition, could be attached to any permission that would overcome that the applicant would have to submit details of an agreement with NI Water to get a connection before the houses could be occupied.
Thank you, Chair, and a supplementary, if I may. And just, Chair, in terms of the positioning of the windows, and the agent and the applicant have offered to change the window or look at it again. Could I ask the officer's opinion as to whether this will, get round the whole issue of overlooking?
Short answer to that, Councillor, no, it wouldn't. In terms of the suggested use of translucent windows as well, the policy does discuss that, and the report discusses that as well. The use of obscured glass in appropriate circumstances can also minimise potential for overlooking, for example, in bathroom or landing windows. But obscured glass is not considered an acceptable solution for windows serving main rooms such as bedrooms or living rooms or dining rooms, for obvious reasons. So the current position is that the use of obscured glass would only be for windows, where people wouldn't be living in, so halls, etc. There are 2 bedroom windows. I'll just take you back, members. You can see. Just take you back to the plans. So you can see then the blue arrow is the elevation facing towards the adjacent houses. So, excuse me, you have a ground floor living room window, and on the other side of the pedestrian avenue is the front windows of the adjacent houses. The first floor plan then shows the upstairs windows, and you can see the bedroom 1 is directly opposite the first floor of the houses next door. And then you have the 2 side windows, which are also then looking towards the property to the side. So that's looking directly towards number 7 and 8, home view mews. And then that's the view then of the windows looking down to the other properties then, which, as I say, are only 6 metres away.
It's not directly.
So that's the properties directly opposite you. And you can see the terrace of houses there. And then that's number 14. So you can see the location of our building is the red rectangle. And if you turn around and look to the back at number 14, that's the windows then you can see in number 14. And on the side of number 14 then is the blue star. So there's no windows facing in that direction. They're all facing up towards our application site.
Okay. Have we any other questions? If not, I'm looking for a decision here, members. Robert?
I've listened to both sides of the argument. All right, we're living in a town and we expect high densities, but we also are living under regulations where amenity space is just as valuable as living space. There are other areas in the town that you can develop. This is a particularly overdeveloped area, and I would like to see it further overdeveloped, particularly in the circumstances. So I will go with the officer's recommendation, and I propose that this application is refused. Thank you.
Thanks, Robert. Have a seconder?
Chair, I have my hand up, maybe it's Mary here, Thomas.
Okay, Mary, I couldn't see that. Please go ahead.
No problem. And it was remiss of me at the start, sorry, Thomas, not to wish you well in your year ahead. So the best of luck for the chair of planning.
Thanks, Mary.
Chairman, I'm listening to the both sides of the argument as well, and I would have a differing view to that of Roberts. I think we're badly needing houses in our towns, and I'm thinking of our own town and village where I live in, and where there's bigger spaces, and it is a very overpopulated area already. On balance, when there's no objections and we need housing, and it's already, to the extent where it is very much a built up part of the town, I don't think this property will make it any more better or worse, other than providing us with an opportunity to have more housing in Oma. On that basis, I wouldn't be supportive of the officer's recommendations and don't fully support that it is going to have an adverse effect on the existing properties. If it was going to be doing that with overlooking a loss of light and overshadowing, surely some of the people within the properties would have highlighted that and their concerns, and that would have been material for me if that had have taken place. In the absence of that, I'm content that it's not the case. It is very built up already, as Robert has said, but I don't think this is going to make it any, difference really. It is what it is already. Secondly, I don't believe the bit of space that there is open space and of really any benefit to the people there. And perhaps even this opportunity of this housing might tidy it up, dare I say, a little. So for that reason, Chair, I would propose we approve this application, but that's only my own view. I have listened to the whole argument, but I go for approval for me, but it's entirely up to the members, so I just don't support Roberts, and I just put that on record. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, Mary. Darren?
Yeah, members, if I could just add a note of caution just in some of the comments there with respect to the members. The comments there that there's no objections. Obviously, objections are material considerations and they are to be given weight, but the absence of objections does not automatically mean that everybody's happy with it. I think the applicant said himself there is tenants, so it's going to be very difficult for a tenant to object to a landlord's application with respect. So it's the absence of objections is not something that really I think members should give significant or determining weight to. It's the issues about the impact upon the amenity of the neighbouring properties that is paramount and important here. And as you've seen from the agents speaking sort of rights earlier, this will be brought up at later applications. So if members want to approve this, it's on the basis that it either meets policy or it doesn't, and give a reason why you're approving it contrary to policy. So if a member wishes to maybe expand on how she feels that the application meets the policy and there's no impact on the amenity and privacy of neighbours or loss of sunlight.
No problem. Thanks, Darren, and appreciate your comments regarding no objections. Well, I don't know if to make it any clearer. It's just the reason I really think it meets policy is because I don't agree with the reasons for refusal. I don't believe that it will have an adverse effect on the existing properties in terms of overlooking, loss of light and overshadowing. I don't believe that myself, that's my view, and I don't, that the provision that is there that is called open space at the minute, I don't deem it to be what I would call sufficient open space within that area. I think it's more like a bit of a wreck of a space. So that'll be my views. If they're not strong enough, well be it, but it's just my own personal opinion, and for that reason, I would be contrary to it, Darren. Thank you, Chair.
Yeah.
Okay. Paul, did you want to?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I just wanted to make a comment in relation to the need for housing in Oma. In terms of my experience through the LDP, we have substantial commitments, hard commitments, shovel-ready projects for residential development already in place. So in terms of need, there would be no need for additional residential. There's plenty approved and ready to go on development on site. So thanks, Chair.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. John?
Thank you. I'm not sure. There's no mention of the other ground. Is this site standalone from this developer, or do they own the bits either side? Or there's no, there's nothing to. If they build there, then they'll maybe build, or are they going to use those as amenities in the area? Is that something we can put on if they own the land? I know I didn't ask that question, but it's not clear if they own the land either side of the site that's indicated. This area, in my experience, it's short-term tenants who generally live there temporarily until they find better properties. They're young people who generally left home, or older people who have moved out of the family home and given it to younger people, and they're living there until they find more suitable accommodation. A year or two, in my experience, of that residential area, and then they move on once they've established a better location to live. Where this is temporary accommodation as such, although it is landlorded, it's well maintained, it's good houses to live in. But if there's is there any plans for amenities, or can we put a caveat that there has to be amenities put either side of that property?
So the application site then includes the red line. Just go back to the start, members. So that's the site location plan. Pop up in a second. Yeah, so the site location plan then includes the application site. That's in the control of the applicant, and they're required then to show additional land that they might own or control in blue. So there's no additional land shown in that. So we have to take from the application that they only own the red line. In terms of that red line, it includes the building then and the garden area. So you can see the right-hand slide then shows the take it from number 12, and then the garden, and then there's our rectangle where the building's going to be. That's their garden area, and then the garden area for number 14. So you will have the amenity space to the side of the new property and the retention of the 2 amenity spaces at the other properties. In terms, just members of the comments again, just as I say, I just a note of caution, because this will be thrown back at us, and there will be applications later on where the issues of overlooking and loss of privacy will be raised, and there will be objections, and we will have to fall back on planning policy. So this will set not a precedent, because every application is considered on its merits, but certainly it will be heavily relied on by developers in the future on other applications. If members are of the view to approve this, I think it may be in the case more that they accept there is a loss of amenity, and they accept there is overlooking and overshadowing of the neighbouring properties, but given its location in the highly populated, densely housed area of Campsie, it's acceptable, and it's not out of keeping with the existing overlooking and overshadowing that occurs, and therefore it's acceptable to go contrary to the policy and recommend approval. As I say, members, I'll be just very cautious of it going ahead and saying it meets policy, because that will set a benchmark that will be used back against this council on other applications where there are objectors.
Okay, Josephine.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Well, Chair, I do find this to be a challenging application, and I feel very strongly about the protection of amenity space. I feel that just because one lives in a town doesn't mean to say that those residents can't enjoy good quality living amenities. So, you know, I'm very, very strong on that. However, I know this region very well, and I know the housing density, the type of housing, and whilst one cannot generalize, you know, this application stands on its own merit, and we cannot say what type of tenant will occupy the property, whether it will be a short-term lease or a longer-term lease, or whether the property will be for sale. We don't know that. But what I do know, and I fully appreciate Paul's comments, Chair, regarding the amount of residential development that is in the pipeline. This is a particular application. It's for a 2-bedroom dwelling. And in my experience, that type of accommodation is not readily found. And I do think that it will suit, it will fill a particular niche in the market. The other advantage of this location, Chair, is that it is right in the middle, in the heart of Omagh. It would be particularly suited to a resident who didn't have access to transportation and could easily access shops and local amenity without private transportation. And I think that there is a need for that type of property. I have been convinced by Darren's argument that it is not really possible to overcome the overshadowing and overlooking aspect of this development. But I think if we accept that and say that whilst it doesn't meet the policy strictly, that it will provide for a certain type of accommodation, which I think would be beneficial for the residential development of this area. And also we know that that area of Campsie, there's a lot of businesses there, but I do support the need for residential properties as well. So for that reason, I would support Councillor Garrity's recommendation that we approve this application, but on the grounds that whilst it doesn't meet policy, that it does compensate by way of providing a certain type of housing which would be valuable to the local community and would provide a good mix between residential and business properties, Chair. Thank you.
You seconding that, Josephine?
And second, Councillor Garrity's proposal, Chair.
Okay. Mary?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And just to, I suppose I would, I'm heeding the advice from Darren and to just amend my comments in light of his advice, because I do know we have to be careful going forward. Where, in my own opinion, may slightly differ, but I think for our own sake as a council, that I want to say that I accept the officer's recommendation, but in this circumstances, it overcomes the recommendations where we can approve because of the reasons that were outlined. So I think would that be perhaps better, Darren, going forward for the officer? So and thanks for your advice on that. So and thanks to Josephine for the support. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. I have it proposed and seconded in line with the advice of the planning officer to go against the recommendation and to approve here. I had it proposed but not seconded to go with the recommendation. So we have Alan.
I want to express that I'm happy to support that.
Supporting to go against the recommendation. Thank you, Alan. Okay, are we all agreed? No, Robert? And with the exception of Robert, we are all agreed? Okay. Thank you. Darren, if you want to sum up.
Application LA10 2021-1135. It's a full application. The recommendation by officers was to refuse planning permission, subject to 2 reasons. Members have gone contrary to the officer's recommendation and granted permission. In terms of the suggested conditions, member, could I ask that the power to attach conditions is delegated back to officers? And that would include the power to issue a condition relating to the NI water issues about the provision of the means of sewage disposal.
So proposed.
Yeah, I'll second that.
Okay, thanks, Darren and Josephine. Okay, members, we're going to move along.
Councillor Coyle here.
Councillor
I came through in the middle of that application, so I will not take any part in the decision, just to have it noted, please.
Okay, thanks, John. Okay, we're moving on then to application number 3 here, and that's LA10 2021-0360.
Okay, members, so application number 3, LA10 2021-0360. It's an outline application by D&K Monteith on lands 200 metres west of 50 Church Road, Barra, and it's accessing off the Herbal Shinny Road. The proposal then is described in the application forms as a farm dwelling with a detached garage. The recommendation by officers is to refuse planning permission for the reasons listed within the report and subject to 6 reasons. All members, on the screen then is the site location plan. You can see the site is identified up beside the yellow star in the top left of the slide. Access will be onto the Herbal Shinny Road. The site address, so it is number 50 Church Road, and Church Road then is shown by the blue line in the bottom right hand side of the slide. So the applicant then is D&K Monteith, and their address is 15 Herbal Shinny Road, which is opposite the site. And as I say, members, the application is described as a farm dwelling with a detached garage, and I'll come back to that in a second, as is important throughout the consideration of the application. The application site location plan does include indicative location of the dwelling, which is identified by the hatched area and the annotation preferred site. and that also reflects the site address, which is 200 metres west of 50 Church Road. So the application before you is considering that location as the proposed location for the dwelling. It is described as a farm dwelling, and the P1C form then has been accompanies the application. So you can see the name and address of the applicant for planning permission is D&K Monteith of 15 Erbelshinny Road. The name and address of the owner of the active farm business is H.J.W. Moore in Cookstown. And that's important, members, because the planning policies relate to the farm business. So the critical issues there relate to Mr. Moore's farm business. So these are Mr. Moore's farm maps. I've just pulled out the map then that relates to the application site. And you can see then the land outlined in yellow is the land that's claimed by Mr. Moore on his farm business maps. The site itself is not on the farm map. It's identified with the yellow star adjacent to number 6. So you can see it's not an area of land that has been claimed. However, that is not relevant or material insofar as the land doesn't have to be claimed. So I wouldn't give that any weight, members. It's just to note. So the application site then is outlined in red on the aerial photograph. You can see it's opposite number 15, which is the applicant's home address. And then adjacent to number 15 is an outdoor country pursuits centre. And you'll recall the recent application to retain a building at that site as a sales unit. And that's just a photograph then looking in, and the site is in front of you, just the other side of the fence. And then just from the other side, of the other corner of the road frontage, looking in, you can see the laneway along the left, and our site then is the right-hand side of the laneway. So that's the Outdoor Country Pursuits Centre, and the building, the white building then on the left, has been recently approved. Members will recall that coming before you last month. That's number 15 then, which is a 2-storey house where the applicant currently lives. And as I say, members, the location of that number 15 then is directly opposite that. That's the issue with the farm dwelling is important, members, because the policy requires the new farmhouse or the new house on the farm to be visually linked or clustered with a group of buildings on the farm. So number 15 is not a building on Mr. Moore's farm. Neither is the family business unit that's adjacent to number 15 on Mr. Moore's farm. So the preferred site is an isolated site sitting out on its own that is adjacent to number 15, but that's not visually linked with the building on the farm. There are buildings on the farm then on the right-hand side of the slide. You can see it annotated there, principal farmhouse, and there's a house there identified as number 50. So reasons for refusal, members, there are 6 reasons for refusal. In terms of the first 2, they relates to protected habitats and species. Those, members, I'll be honest, could be overcome by the submission of additional information. So it's really 3 and 4 and 5 and 6 are the key issues. In terms, I'll just take you through those, members. You'll note from the report, if we take the farm dwelling at the start, so the description is for a farm dwelling with CTY 10 as a critical issue. There is an active and established farm, nothing's been sold off, but the site is not visually linked or clustered with an established group of buildings on Mr. Moore's farm. The applicant, the owner of the farm, as I say, lives in Coke. In terms of CTY 6, there's limited supporting information and no compelling and site-specific reasons for a new dwelling in the countryside. There's also no consideration of alternatives which would appear to exist. In terms of CTY 7, that's for a site beside a non-agricultural business. That the case is being made that they need a site beside the outdoor pursuits business and the shop, as the applicant needs to live beside that premises. However, there's already a house beside that business, number 15, where the applicant currently lives. So therefore, there's no need for a second dwelling, as they're going to move out of that, and his son is going to move into that house. There also appears to be another property in the family ownership up at number 50. Finally, then, under CTY 1, there's no overriding reasons why a new house is essential in this countryside location.
Okay, thanks very much, Darren. We have speaking rights now by Richard Collins, who is our agent here, and Derek Monteith, the applicant himself. So you have 10 minutes, Richard. You're an old hand at this now.
Indeed, I'm getting very experienced. Hopefully, it's not going to be habit forming, but thank you again, Chair, for the opportunity to speak on behalf of the applicants, Karen and Derek Monteith. By way just of a little bit of history, Derek and Karen are long-established friends, and clients of mine. And 25 years ago, we designed successfully the house that they're now living in at number 15 Shinny Road. Karen herself was born and raised in number 50, so it is the family farm. Now, in those days, all those 25 years ago, planning considerations were really about integration and suitable sites. And of course, we found one. And Derek and Karen built their house and then started their business, which has now flourished into something quite significant. As you'll hear from Derek, there are now family reasons for the lineage of ownership and running of the business to change. And Derek and Karen have gone into semi-retirement. When we looked at the site, obviously the key criteria on a PPS 21 is to get your foot in the door with regard to criteria through DERA. Obviously, they need to have meet the qualifications of size of farm, business reference number, etc., etc. All of that criteria was met, and they moved then on to the planning side of things. Now, within the policy, they talk about clustering with existing farm buildings, and also perhaps reading from vantage points or approach points to the site. The site itself at number 50 lies halfway between the Church Road and Shinny Road, approximately in the middle, and there's 300-meter driveway or laneway to each road. Now, when you're on the Church Road, which is the only way you can see even where the buildings are, it is so integrated with the landscape, it's very, very difficult to even see where the buildings are in this instance. Given that Derek and Karen wish to have their son and family move into their family home, but not necessarily fully retire, we looked at the available sites, and certainly to put it 200 meters off a road to read with the existing cluster was going to be not only technically not what anybody would want, but also it was going to take away any visual link they had with their existing premises, their business location. So it was decided to ask through the policy, given that one of the primary motivations of PPS 21 is to try and sustain the community, and this is very, very much a community-based application. The lineage is quite clear. Karen was born at number 50. She lives at number 15. She wishes to retire in close proximity to number 15, and her children, or her son, is going to move in with their children. So what you're doing is protecting a long sort of line of rural lineage here. We appreciate that, yes, it doesn't quite meet the policy, but we'd also argue that the site as chosen, not only does it give the advantage of direct visual link onto the business and Derek and Karen's existing house, but the site itself is mature, and in integration terms, a modest house that we're proposing would certainly fit in without changing the character in any way of the countryside. And I think even Darren might agree that in the old days, whenever it was all about integration at this site, would have been certainly suitable for the development we're talking about. So I'm acutely aware that I'm down to a couple of minutes, so maybe pass on to Derek, if that's okay. And thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you, Richard. Derek?
Firstly, I'd like to thank members of the Planning Committee for giving me the opportunity to make my representations regarding this application. In my initial representation, I referred to land on which the application was to be made as unused bog type land. This has been a misrepresentation on my behalf. This land has been arable land up until approximately 10 years ago. When my late father-in-law, I used to harvest hay from it. As a result of receiving the notification, I sought assistance from a local field officer from the British Association of Shooting and Conservation to assess if there was any of the aforementioned species, badgers, pine marten, red squirrels, identified as being present in this meadow. And bearing in mind that it's a grass rushy meadow with one hedge adjacent to the public road, the assessment was made that there was no badgers, pine martens or red squirrels present in the field, and the likelihood of hedgehogs being present was slim. With regard to this, the second issue that the planners have raised regarding habitat species, Again, I would assess that the planning officers have included this reason because I had initially indicated that it was unused bog type land, when in actual fact it was arable meadow with grass and rushes and buttercups. And I do not believe that the development of the site will result in the unacceptable impact on or damage to known priority habitats or priority species. With regard to the CTY 6, I could have quite easily asked Richard to apply for a site within the perimeters of the wooded area, which you could see in the plans and the aerial photographs that Darren had presented, which lies between the farm cluster and the proposed site, and which possibly would have fulfilled the criteria C of PPS 21, which we're failing on. But I didn't want to do this, as it would be encroaching on wildlife habitat, which I've been preserving for the past 25 years. Both my wife and I have been brought up in the countryside. We have reared our family in the countryside, and the conservation of the countryside and its wildlife has been something which I personally have been very passionate about. The proposed site itself lends itself to what we want and need. It is beside the electric, the water, the broadband. There is easy access to the public road. It is also adjacent to the business that my wife and I have built together, and now employs 4 full-time staff and 2 part-time staff. The planning officer makes reference to dwellings available for sale in the local area, which is correct. They're all 2-story turnkey properties, which is not what we require. The planners also refer that I haven't demonstrated a reason why I needed to retire to a house in the countryside. Why shouldn't I retire to the country? We have lived in the country for the best part of our life. We own the land, and all we want to do is build a single-story bungalow that my wife and I can retire to, that I can bring my mother to and live in relative comfort and security, and we can be beside our son and family and continue to help and support him in the running of the family business. With regard to CTY 10, the farm itself has been leased to Canon Harry Moore for the last 25 years. Canon Moore was, as Darren has indicated, the rector in Coke. He retired some 15 years ago and moved to his present address just outside the village of Beara, which is where the farm business ID is registered. The planning officer had made reference to that there being no activity on the farm buildings at the cluster, which would be correct, as Canon Moore uses his own buildings at his farmyard. There is approximately 30 acres of the farm which is situated west of the Urbelsini Road, and going forward, it is my intention to construct some sort of general purpose farm building to service this land. It is hoped that this construction would be situated in the vicinity of or adjacent to the buildings at 1315 Urbelsini Road, as it is my intention to start farming this land myself. That completes my representations, and hopefully you will look favourably on them. Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you, Derek. And to Richard. Members, have we any questions? No, I'm not seeing any questions. So thank you very much, Richard and Derek. And now we have representation. Sorry, John. One question, John.
Yeah, there was in the application it said that you had to be close to the business due to alarms and stuff. And what way does that work? I think that's to Derek. I think probably because it's his business. As a fire, I'm assuming this firearms stored at those premises.
Okay, thanks, John. Derek.
Yes, well, there's very strict security arrangements that have to be put in place with regard to this particular type of business, and the guidance comes from the Home Office and the PSNI. And let's say this is a new build. It's been recently constructed, and it's been constructed to both those sets of guidelines. Part of the guidelines is a monitored alarm, which is in place. But as well as that, the police will also assess who actually lives in the vicinity of the property, if there's any dogs attached to the property, and just anything that is relevant with regard to the security of the actual building itself.
Okay, John. Okay. There's no further members indicating, so I'm going to go to Councillor Bert Wilson. Bert, you have 5 minutes.
Chair. Yeah. Well, I've visited a few times to do with the last application that was, as well as that, but I wasn't looking into it as much that time but the site that the applicant has applied for in this stage, it's really the trees that are behind that would be attached to the old house. That would be number 50. In fact, I haven't seen that house. It's somewhere in among those trees, and to try to attach a dwelling to that, it would be really desecration of that site and the forest that is there and well established. There is already water and electric on the site, so there's no work to be put in to get the site on the ground that has been applied for. That site is actually 50 to 60 meters from the business on the opposite side of the road. It is a first-class site and can be seen. It's really well integrated. It was also the proposed site was part of the farm business, although that field is separate from the rest of it at this minute in time. We are talking here about 3 families and their futures. This is not just for Derek himself. This is for himself and his wife and his son, and I'm not sure whether he's married, to be honest, or not, and his mother. So you're talking 3 families here, and the need for to assist them in their future and have things for Karen, his mother-in-law, who is probably like myself, getting on in years. There is the principle of a farmhouse, yes, that may be, but it also states here on CTY6 that for an employee there is the opportunity as well. Well, I would count his son. I'm sure he's taken pay out of the business, and if need be, he would be probably classed as an employee of the business. So that would really, to me, it would integrate into the planning application. The farm business has been actively going on for the past 10 years. That those trees and forest to the rear had been for DERA had those integrated and designated as a DERA on a set aside area, which was not allowed to be interfered with. So Derek, as he says, has a love for trees and the like of that, and he doesn't. I'm sure nobody wants to, and as I said, I don't think Deirdre would be very pleased either if somebody started in with a bulldozer and threw them. Really, I don't know what more I can say. This is a business, a very prosperous business, going on well, and all they're asking for is the opportunity to integrate their own family into that and on for the future. It's not, we were talking at the previous one there to do about families and that, and I believe that this one is really it's really a need for 3 families, and we need to look at that and take that into when we're thinking about it. If it doesn't fit into the farm one, which it should do, because as I say, it's actually the site is actually halfway between number 50 and number 15, and CTY 6 should definitely fit in if one so if the other one doesn't. So I would ask the councillors here to take a sensible look at this and help this family out. It's a genuine case. It's not for sale, and I believe it deserves an approval. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Bert. And Starrant.
Yeah, members just happy to take questions.
Robert?
Thanks, Tom. Darren, could you put a couple of the photographs up, maybe the site layout and then the photographs in off the Herbal Shinny Road?
I'll just run through them again. Councillor, so that's the site location plan.
And
zooming in a bit then.
the extent of the red line
Yep.
takes in the existing cluster at 50 Church Road, doesn't it?
Does, yeah.
Yep. So it's included all of that. Could you go to actually the view in from the Herbal Shinny Road?
So just go back a slide. So members, if we're starting, you can see the road then running parallel with the site or beside the site. If we're standing at the southwest of the application site, so in the corner, looking sort of northeast into the application site in the direction of that arrow, that's the view looking in. And then if you go up to the other end of the site beside the house, where the laneway is into the house, and you turn around, you look back on yourself looking into the site, that's that view.
Yeah. So there's the whole of that woodland area that's been referred to by the applicant, Derek Monteith, is mature woodland, and that laneway that we see in the photograph runs up to the existing cluster of farm buildings. Look, we have in the past, I believe, looked at farm buildings and the associated ground roundabout to see what actually constitutes one, integration, and two, actually clustering. I think the conundrum for us here is that the belt of mature wood, basically between the outlined red site and the cluster, is the mature woodland, and it's how to overcome that under CTY 10. The issue about connecting the existing business on Herbal Shinny Road and the need for positioning is probably peripheral. The issue, I think, on this situation is whether we can rightly or wrongly say that positioning a dwelling somewhere there constitutes one, integration, and constitutes two, actually connectivity to a group of farm buildings. So I think that's what I'm trying to tease out. You have the backdrop of mature woodland. If they're going to get a position on and round the existing farm cluster, they'd have to go up to 50. Isn't that correct? 50 Church Road? Yep. So I think that's where I'm trying to get my head around, whether we can decide that a slight disconnect still gives connectivity with the main farm group, but also integrates in with what's already on the ground. In other words, a mature backdrop. It's more a comment rather than a question to you. Thanks.
Just in response to that, members, unfortunately, there's a step back needed from those comments. The planning policy requires a new building to be visually linked or sited to cluster with an established group of buildings on the farm. So they don't have to be farm buildings, but they have to be buildings on Mr. Muir's farm. And the comment was made in the speaking rights that Mr. Muir uses his own farm buildings. So those buildings that you can see there in that slide, in the bottom right, which is beside the house number 50, those aren't used as part of Mr. Muir's farm business. So they're not buildings on Mr. Muir's farm. So this site is sitting on an isolated plot that it's not visually linked with any group of buildings on Mr. Muir's farm. So the secondary issue then about them actually linking with that is a step too far.
Okay, have we any other questions? If Mary or John wants in, you can just shout, guys, because I can't see your hands all of the time. Josephine?
Thank you, Chair. My question is really in relation to policy CTY6, personal and domestic circumstances, requiring the building to go on the proposed site. Mr. Monteith has told us that because of the nature of his business, there are strict licensing regulations which might apply because of the nature of his building, of his business. Mr. Monteith has indicated that he plans to semi-retire from the business, as presumably he will continue to support his son in that business. So the evidence that Mr. Monteith has given, would that be sufficient in the officer's opinion to overcome the requirements of policy CTY6?
Yeah, so members, you'll recall CTY6 relates to the dwelling in the countryside will be granted for the long-term needs of the applicant where they're compelling and site-specific reason related to the applicant's personal or domestic circumstances. So the case being presented, and which the members referred to, is the proximity to the business. Now that would appear to relate under the CTY7 policy, which is dwellings for non-agricultural business enterprises, rather than CTY6, insofar there are no personal circumstances related to the applicant, to his personal or domestic circumstances, which require him to live on this site. In terms of the CTY7, dwellings for non-agricultural business enterprises, that's a policy that really members haven't had much experience of. We haven't had many applications for those. The starting point in those members is to always look and see, well, if there's a business there at the moment, how is it operating at the moment, and is it operating effectively? And in this case, you have a business which is operating lawfully and has the approvals from the various statutory agencies, I'm sure the PSNA, etc. And that's based on the fact there's a house next door, number 15. There's also a house up the laneway, number 50. So it operates at the moment quite effectively and lawfully. So why is there a need for a second house? So the information wouldn't support the need for a second dwelling, whereas it operates quite effectively and properly now with one dwelling. The applicant is retiring from that dwelling, and his son, who runs the business, is going to move into that house. So essentially, members, there'll be no change to the current situation from how it lawfully and properly operates at the moment. So there wouldn't really be a demonstrable need for a second house. It might enhance or improve things, but that's not the policy test, members.
Okay, if there's no further questions, I'm looking for a decision, members.
Thanks, Tom. It is a conundrum, this one, because of the circumstances that were touched on, basically, and that drifts, as Josephine has actually said, between CTY6 and, as Darren said, CTY7. We've had certain information provided by the agent and the applicant, but I don't think it's in enough depth to actually allow us to scrutinise properly under those two policies. And because of the circumstances and the nature of the actual application, I would actually, and I don't like doing it, but I'm offering if it was deferred so that the issue around these two could be represented back to our planning officers for further consideration. In other words, more depth provided around those two so that proper determination could be made and bring it back, because it looks like under CTY 10 and the issues represented that seems to be falling off in regard to actually being looked at to try and rebut it. So my proposal is deferral for at least a month or 2 months so that the additional information that's required from the agent and applicant is presented to our planning officers. Thank you, Chair.
Robert? Aaron?
Thank you very much, Chair, and I agree with what Councillor Irvine has just said there. It's a very difficult application, this one, to get our heads around. And and I suppose I've said this in other applications, it's no one's interest that people are refused. But however, on this occasion, I would be seconding Councillor Irvine's proposal for a deferral for a suitable time, and I think he said 2 months there. So I'm happy enough to second that for further discussions to take place between planning officers, the agent, and the applicants. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Sarah. Darren? Is 2 months suitable?
Well, the application would be deferred and brought back in September, members, if that was acceptable to you all. If that was agreed.
Yeah, everybody agreed? Okay, thank you. Thank you, everyone. Tommy?
I need to request a comfort break for 5 minutes, Chair, please.
Read my mind. Take 10 minutes. And ready to go again. We are moving through quite well here. We have one application that we have deferred because the agent is on holidays. And then we have application number 5, item number 5, and the agent isn't here as yet. He's going to join us, Brendan, in the chamber. So we're going to move on to application number 6, and that is LA 10 2022 0068. And we'll open on that one.
Yeah.
Darren?
Okay, members, so just moving on then to application number 6, and we'll come back into application 5 when the agent arrives. So LA 10 2022 0068. It's a full application for the change of use, alterations and extension to a domestic garage to form a credit union office. The applicant then is Lakeland Credit Union, and the location then is 6 Tully Meadows in Ballinalack. The recommendation is to refuse planning permission for the reasons listed within the report and subject to the 2 reasons. I'll take members through the details then. On the screen is the site location plan, and you can see the site then in the centre of the plan outlined in red, and it's a roadside property facing onto the public road. And the plan then also shows the adjacent houses and developments in the locality. Just to provide more context, members, of where we are. So we're at number 6 in Tully Meadows. So our site is a rectangular shaped plot fronting onto the public road. You then have 5 houses to side and rear in Tully Meadows, and 7, 8 and 9 then facing onto Killywillen Road above the site. Across the road then you have Chestnut Grove, which is development numbers 2, 4, 6 all the way around to 22. 1, 7 and 9 then are adjacent to the site but would back on to the application site. What you have at the moment is the existing garage, so a single-story domestic garage commonly found throughout the area. The west elevation, as you can see in the middle there, that's the elevation facing onto the public road with the roller door on it. And then you have the 2 side elevations on the right-hand side, and the floor plan then is on the left-hand side. So just a Google Street View image then showing the location of the garage. So you can see the elevation then facing onto the road and accessed out through that access. There's the adjacent house, and you can see then the other properties at the back, which back onto the application site. The block plan then shows the building and the existing house, so it's identified there in the centre of the slide. And the building then, which is to be altered and extended and changed into the new office, is the top right of the site. And you'll see the parking area, the 2 car parking spaces and the turning area for vehicles. If you imagine, members, you're standing at the yellow star and you're looking in, that's the view there, members. So you can see then the access coming into the site. That is the entrance in and out to the application site and the location of the credit union. Vehicles will come in, park, reverse and turn, and then drive out again. So the proposed plans then, on the left you can see the existing building. So I've just identified that, members, in red just for ease of reference. So the left hand side in red is the existing building. The right hand side then is the proposed extension. So you can see internally there will be 2 offices. They're a fairly good sized reception area, and then a kitchen and a disabled toilet area in the new extended part of the building. Elevations then, so there'll be a doorway into the premises. These are just the proposed elevations. So that's the critical elevation then, members, facing onto the road. As you can see, the building will be extended, the roof will be changed and realigned. The garage door at the front will be replaced with a white UPVC window, and the opening then made good. There is a proposed illuminated box sign, but that's not part of this application. It would require separate consent if the application was approved. So at the moment, members, we're just looking at the planning application, which is for the change of use, the extensions and alterations. So again, members, you'll note from the report the critical issue for the planning officers is the vehicle access. DFI roads have suggested the access is changed and there's an in and out arrangement, where you'd come in at A and go around the back of the building and then out at B. However, that doesn't work because the back of the building then is where the owner and occupier of the house would live and park their cars. So there'd be vehicles parked there, which would prevent vehicles driving in and around. So the only option then is to come in and out at A. When you're coming in and out of A, especially looking to the right, there's a 25-meter visibility display, which is the line in red, looking to the right-hand side. And that's that view there. So you're coming out of the access, looking to the right-hand side, along the edge of the road, along that red line. And they only have a 25-meter display, whereas 33 meters is the minimum. And that's a slide again, just showing the two accesses. So you can see the top one coming into the existing garage, and then the bottom one is the other entrance to the property. You can also see them members along the front of the property. The area between the wall and the road has been stoned. These are surrounded by low curbs, so vehicles can easily drive over that and park there, and there's nothing to prevent anybody doing that if there's a lot of people attracted, a lot of customers attracted. So there's nothing to stop people parking there, and that then has obvious impact upon the visibility coming in and out of the access. And again, that's just a view then of the proposed access. The visibility display is up to the right towards that blue bin, and you can see there's a limited view around the corner. So the proposal is for change of use of an existing domestic garage at a house in Ballinalek, an extension, more or less doubling the floor space to provide 2 offices, a reception, the kitchen, and the toilet for the credit union building. Although members will note from the report that although the use is out of character with the surrounding area, which is largely residential or wholly residential, it will not harm the appearance of the area or create any conflict with neighbours from noise or nuisance. The credit union office itself will not create any nuisance. It's the vehicles coming in and out of the premises that are the difficulty. 3 spaces are required in accordance with the standards, parking standards, and they only have 2 provided due to the small size of the site and the limited area for the cars to turn and circulate. This creates a conflict with road users as vehicles are likely to reverse out onto the road or alternatively will park on the road on the stoned area, blocking views of people coming in and out, and also for pedestrians walking along the road. And secondly, members, then there are limited visibility to the north in that it needs 33 metres but only has 25. And just to remind members that we have representations and objections from this application from 5 properties. The residents live immediately beside the site and have objected, and those representations are listed within part 4 of the report and summarised then within the report. And they do include issues about car parking, property used on a Wednesday evening, increased traffic, pedestrians having to walk around the corner on the public road, etc. So just remind members there are objections to this application. So the recommendation then, members, is to refuse planning permission for the reasons listed within the report and subject to the 2 reasons.
Okay, thanks very much, Darren. And we have speaking rights by Tom Elliott, MLA, in support of the application. And Tom, you have 5 minutes. Can you hear us?
Hello, Chairman.
Yep. Tom, you're very welcome.
Thank you very much. I can hear you, can't see you, Chairman, but I hope that's okay anyway. I've had trouble logging on. So thank you very much. Sorry, many minutes, Chair?
You have 5, Tom.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Chair, and best wishes in your role as Chair. Obviously, this is a local community service, and the limited use that will be made of this is very limited. It's not like a credit union that is open every day, open every week. It is open one evening in the week, and the maximum that there's going to be there at any one time is 4 persons. Probably that is only going to be 2 vehicles at any one time. I know that I attended that credit union just to see the operation when it was in another location just before it moved there. And I must say that the use of it is extremely limited. So I do understand the residents' concerns in there because if there was going to be a significant intensification of use of vehicles, then obviously that would have a detrimental impact to the residents in there, but it's not. I'm not sure what the intensification of use would entail, but if it's an additional 2 vehicles or 4 vehicles in the week. Is that a significant intensification? Maybe there might be a requirement for a modest traffic survey in there, but I have to say, Chair, on that basis, and councillors, I don't think there is any real intensification in that respect. If some one house had 3 visitors in the week, is that classified as intensification of use? I wouldn't rate that it is. This is also providing a very valuable community service, particularly in the society we're living in at the moment. Now, where obviously finances are very, very stretched for families, and this is providing that service, as we're all aware. Even credit unions are moving towards more direct payments, and there's less cash, so that means there'll be less people calling with money. A lot of it is derived from direct payments from the credit union account into the bank accounts of the customers, and vice versa. Most of the repayments are all done by direct debit now, so that it doesn't require people to call there at the premises. So I have to say, I think as a very limited facility, but it is providing that valuable community use now, and obviously requests for finance from credit unions have increased over the last certainly 6 months in light of the very, very tight financial constraints on families. And I do accept that the planners have indicated that the only use or the only objection from them is this potential intensification of use by vehicle movements, and obviously the issue of coming in and out of that premises or that location. But it's because there's no significant intensification, I don't see that as a major issue, Chairman. Thank you for your consideration.
Okay, thank you very much. Darren, do you have any comments you wish to make, or we go to debate?
Yeah. So members, really, in terms of intensification, the policy PBS3 would talk about a 5% rule, that there would be intensification if there's a 5% increase in traffic. Now, it's very easy to get into mathematical and arithmetic equations and trying to work out numbers, etc. The question before you really is that the proposed use they're saying is for 1 night a week for an hour. Will that bring additional traffic and additional people to the site that will cause a road safety and pedestrian safety issue? As I say, there's only 2 car parking spaces here, and those are fairly restricted and limited. For me, the size of the building with 2 offices, a fairly generous reception area, which in my view appear to underestimate the number of visitors that will come to this building and this unit, this credit union business. So for me, there would appear to be an underestimation of the numbers. The critical thing is that there's a lack of car parking here, and that is directly going to impact upon the road safety. And people are going to park on the road when there is no spaces to park. Again, that's going to cause road safety around that bend. And there's also pedestrian safety for people walking along the road. The business really it needs to provide more parking and more accommodation for people to turn and circulate on the site, or else needs to find somewhere else where that is readily available.
Okay, thanks, Darren. Have we any questions or Tommy?
Chair, thanks, Chair. Well, just on that point, Darren, there, would it be your opinion, and again, I'm only asking for your opinion, I know you can't stand over it or anything, do you think within this site, could there be further car parking made available that would accommodate within the floor space at the house? Darren, your opinion, please.
Yeah, I did look at, I visited the premises myself. If I just take you back, members, to the photographs, really. Sorry, set up here. So that's the view then. Looking in, you can see the access coming in to the existing garage, and the house is in to the side. The car parking spaces then are shown on the plan in front of you. So you can see the 2 rectangles. So one of them is for a disabled or wheelchair user, and that's directly in front of the premises. And then the other one is to the side of the existing garage. So if I just go back to that slide, so one of them will be to the side of that garage, and one of them will be directly in front of the garage. and the turning area then will be on the left-hand side where there's a break in the wall. So there's no real room in this area for additional parking that I could see that wouldn't conflict with that layout. However, you can see at the back there's an existing shed used as garage space and storage for dwelling. That's, you can just see it there, a lean-to shed at the back in behind the house. So I don't know whether the applicant can look at the application, the bigger picture, and see whether they can take some of that space over and use that as parking and create an appropriate turning and servicing area. But as it stands, what's before you today just has 2 spaces. And that really does, in my view, create a danger to road users.
And just one further supplementary that, what's the relation between this application and the people that own the house?
Oh, they own both properties.
Thank you.
I think the credit union owns the house and rents it out. There's the garage in.
Okay, members, if there's no other questions, then I'm looking to move to a decision.
Right. You think that the requirements could be met with further discussion, Darren?
What I'm saying is that it's not as though there's not room in there. Just get the plan up. So physically there is room in there. Whether or not they can make that work with the location of the existing dwelling and the garage is there, whether they can make that work on the ground is for the applicant. But as it stands, the 2 spaces is 1 short. The turning and circulation of those vehicles coming in and out will result in them conflicting with people coming in. So there is a road safety issue, but certainly this is one for the applicant to maybe try and sort out himself if members don't wish to go forward with a refusal.
Thank you.
Yeah, Robert?
Yeah, I know that credit unions actually use domestic premises because of the shortage of commercial and also because of the cost involved. There's one in Lisbelow, and essentially it's the same. The back end of it is a new build, is a private property, and the front end is actually the commercial premises, but there's parking on site. But I know with that, it's a lot more active, and there is parking on the side of the road, but it gets away with it. I think there's probably a solution here that needs a little more talking. I wouldn't want to go with a refusal. I think I would propose a deferral and let our officers actually talk through with the applicant the issues around road safety and the ability, I think, with a little work that within the curtilage of the existing property, something could be organised that would better range that could accommodate the tenant in the bungalow and allow for commercial activity that wouldn't be deemed unsafe. So my proposal is a deferral so that discussions can take place and then it'll come back to the committee. Or if the discussions prove fruitful, I think we could leave it in the hands of the officers to actually make the decision just and put it on the list. Thank you.
John?
Could I just cut in there, members? Sorry, sorry, apologies.
Yep.
There is an issue though, members, as I said, in relation to the visibility display. If you look on the screen, the visibility display coming out of that access to the right-hand side is shown as 25 metres. And the minimum standard that DFI roads have asked for is 33 metres. So there is a substandard, if you want to use that expression, access there, where there isn't appropriate visibility for vehicles coming in and out of access A. Now that's something that officers cannot resolve. There's also, you can see there, members, the visibility would go across the property next door, and there's a wall there as well. So there's an issue in relation to visibility coming out of there for vehicles that officers cannot resolve.
Okay, point made, Darren. John?
Thank you, Chair. Darren, could I ask the speed limit on that road? I'm not familiar. Is it national speed limit or is that known?
I don't know, members. Councillor, I wonder if any local members may know better.
Sorry, it's a housing estate, so it'll be 30. It's actually within the confines of Ballinalek village as such. I think it's off the Mill Road, so it
30.
would be still within 30, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Thanks, Robert. I like Robert. Obviously, I take cognizance what Darren has said there, that the 33 meters. But I would second Councillor Irving's proposal to defer the application and have discussion. As the planning officer has said, that the issue of unsafe access, and plus then the 25 meters, which should be 33, maybe needed to be discussed with the applicant, and then some arrangement may be able to facilitate safe entry and exit of this premises, and that rejigging of the car parking spaces may be facilitated and be brought back to the planning committee. So I'm happy to second the proposal. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, John. Josephine?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Well, my query was really just about the visibility splay to the north of the property, and how, Darren has indicated, Chair, that this is not an issue that officers can resolve. So I think it's probably going to have to come back to committee. But I'm just wondering, in terms of safety, would a traffic calming measure, close to the vicinity of the bend to slow down approaching traffic? I appreciate it's a 30-mile-an-hour zone. I just wondered if a traffic calming measure at that point would be acceptable to DFI roads in terms of safety of vehicles exiting from the site.
So a traffic calming measure would need agreement with roads outside of the planning process. I'll be honest, I don't think it would assist this application, members, because the lowest standard you can go down to in terms of visibility is 33 meters, or there's a slightly lower figure than that, it's 30. But even with the introduction of measures to slow cars down, you have to have still 33 as the minimum. So you can't get any lesser than that. So it's really not going to be of any benefit to the applicant. The bend in the road actually does the speed control measure for the applicant, insofar as it does slow cars coming around the corner. So I don't know if that would be of any assistance to them, but certainly the 33 is the minimum that is going to be required for any development like this.
Okay, Anthony?
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I'll be brief because a lot of these issues we've read. Yeah, I was just coming in on what Darren talked about there as well, and thanks for that clarification. And I know what would happen if it did get busy. The whole cars would park on the footpath there on the side of the road, and they would leave it very dangerous. So just what Josephine was saying there with the distance where they own the whole property there, could they use the second exit down to come out, and it wouldn't be as far then maybe? And I'm glad that it's going to go back, because there's a right lot of people objecting. There's 5 residents objecting, which is a lot. So they might feel happier if it was changed a wee bit too. Even could you do that, Darren? Use the other exit? No.
Yeah. So the second exit, member, you can see there's 2 entrances and exits. You have A and B. The garage then is going to be converted to the credit union will use A. Now, DFI roads had suggested you come through A and go out a B, as an example, but that doesn't work because the house needs somewhere to park. So if they're parked then at the back or the side of the house, that just blocks the whole through flow of traffic.
Okay, Aaron?
Thank you, Chair. I just want to lend my support to Councillor Irvine's proposal, seconded by Councillor John Coyle, for the deferral for further discussion on the matter. I think it's important we get it right. Thank you.
Okay, members, we agreed that there is a month's deferral. That be?
Deferred to, can I suggest, members, deferred to September, because anything new coming in will need re-neighbour notified with the objectors watching us carefully. Right. So it'll be September.
Okay, are we all agreed to September deferral?
Yeah. So, members, LA 10 2022-0068F. The recommendation was to refuse planning permission for the reasons listed within the report, subject to 2 reasons. Members have deferred the application until the September Planning Committee to allow additional information to be submitted.
Okay, members, we're going to move to applicant number 5, and Paul's just gone out to get Brendan, who is the agent and is going to join us in the chamber. Okay. You're very welcome, Brendan. And this is LA 10 2022 0463. Darren?
Yeah. So just back to application 5 then, members. So LA 10 2022 0463. So an outline application for 2 infill dwellings for A. Wiley. And it's located then east and adjacent to 56 Fedden Road in Tempo. The recommendation is to refuse planning permission for the reasons listed within the report and subject to 3 reasons. Just take you through them, members. Then on the screen is the details of the site location plan. So you can see the site identified in red, with additional lands then under control of the applicant in blue. The Fedden Road then runs along the site frontage. That's just an aerial image then, looking down on top of the site. So you can see number 56 on the left-hand side. The site then identified in red, additional lands in blue, and the shed then within that, and then number 60 to the right-hand side, and the Fedden Road then running along the front of the site. So critical views then, members. So if you're down in the bottom left of the slide, you can see the yellow star, and you're looking in at number 56. That's the view then looking in towards number 56. You can see the house and the garage sited to the side, so fairly good sized garage. So there are 2 buildings there with a common frontage to the road. So if you then move along the site to the front of number 56, and you're looking across then towards the application site and across the fields, that's the view then looking over the roadside boundary into the site. It extends then from the Landy Hedge on the left-hand side all along the road frontage, almost immediately to beside that cladded shed. There's a laneway there, so it's that entire frontage there with the 2 donkeys on the field. Moving along the road then, so just take it back. So if you walk along the road, that's the view then as you walk along. You can see then the other end of the site and the laneway then running up onto the Fedden Road. You're then at the laneway looking into the site. On the left-hand side, the laneway in the middle then, and the additional lands then in the control of the applicant in blue, with the shed then at the back. And if you turn around then, members, and just look back on your approach, you can see then looking back toward number 56 over on the left-hand side. So if we're standing on the road frontage looking in towards the area in blue, towards the cladded shed, so you're at the yellow star, and the cladded shed then is the blue, beside the blue star, and that's the view looking in. So you can see the cladded shed then, and the land in blue then in front of the cladded shed is identified by the yellow star and has the appearance of an agricultural field. Then you're at the yellow star and you're looking over to the right hand side of the additional lands at number 60, and that's just a view then of number 60. So obviously, members, the application, as you'll note, is for 2 infill dwellings. So you'll just put the policy up to remind you, members. So permission will be refused for a building which creates or adds to a ribbon of development. So it's very clear that this would create or add to a ribbon of development, and that it would link the existing buildings together to create that ribbon. So it would be contrary to CTY 8 because it would create that ribbon of development. However, the policy does allow an exception. You can see then in the second paragraph, exception would be permitted for the development of a small gap, sufficient only to accommodate up to a maximum of 2 houses within an otherwise substantial and continuously built up frontage, and provided this respects the existing development pattern along the frontage in terms of size, scale, setting, and plot size, and meets other planning and environmental requirements. For the purposes of the policy, the definition of a substantial and built-up frontage includes a line of 3 or more buildings along a road frontage without accompanying development to the rear. So just to go into that and explore that in more details, members, you can see the site. The site then is included on the slide in front of you within the red line that's identified by the yellow star. So the policy says you must respect the existing development pattern along the frontage in terms of a number of items, one of which is plot size. So if you look at plot size, you can see number 56 in the bottom left has a frontage of approximately 40 metres. The site then is approximately 70 metres. The adjacent lands in blue is roughly 40 metres, and then number 60 in the top right has a 48 or 50 metres if you want to use a round number. So in considering then the justification and amplification accompanying the policy, it says that in considering what circumstances 2 dwellings might be approved, it's not sufficient to simply show how 2 houses could be accommodated. Applicants must take a full account of the existing development pattern and can produce a design solution to integrate the new buildings. So the site will integrate 2 new buildings of a low elevation, but you also must look then carefully about the 2 houses can be accommodated. And I think that's a key point on this site, members. If you take the plot sizes across number 56 and number 60, which have their gardens to the road, you can see the application site has room for 2 dwellings, so it would be comparable in respect to the plot sizes of the houses next door. However, the adjacent lands then has room for a 3rd house. The key point of the policy is that you must respect the existing development pattern along the frontage in terms of plot size. So you can't simply reduce this to 1 to leave a gap then for 2 houses. You must look at the existing plot sizes along the frontage. The last bullet point of buildings on tradition, the guidance accompanying the policy says a gap site can be infilled with 1 or 2 houses if the average frontage of the new plot equates to the average plot width in the existing ribbon. So that's that number there. And that's not a mathematical or arithmetic test. You have to use planning judgment. But again, when you're looking at the plot sizes, you have 40 metres, 70 metres, 40 and 50. There's room for 2 on our application site, and then the problem is there's room for a 3rd one then within the applicant's other land. So the gap between the 2 houses and the road frontage can take more than 2 houses. The applicant has made the case, and I'm sure we'll continue to do that today, that the gap is between number 56 and the cladded shed. So that's that building in red with a red star on it. Now, whether or not that building has a common frontage to the road, and officers would not agree it doesn't, because between the cladded shed and the road is an agricultural field. Even setting that aside, members, there's room for 2 houses on our application site and a 3rd one in front of the cladded shed. So you will still have room for 3 houses along there, irrespective of whether or not that building has a common frontage to the road. So these are images then from the planning agent's supporting statement. I'll just take you through those then, and I'm sure the agent will want to go back and refer to those when they're going through the presentation. So this is a slide supplied to them showing the aerial photograph. Another slide then showing the application site in red, proposed dwellings shown in blue, and the existing shed then with the green rectangle around it. And 56 and 60 then are marked on it. And then a 3rd slide from the planning agent's supporting statement, which shows 56, the 2 buildings then, and an indicative position of a house in green, and number 60 then, which is in blue. So remember, just to go through the reasons for refusal, then you've got CTY 8 as it would result in the creation of a ribbon development, and it's not an exception to policy as it's not a small gap site sufficient to accommodate only a maximum of 2 houses. It's contrary to 8 and 14 then, in that it would result in the creation of ribbon development and cause a detrimental change to or further erode the rural character of the area by reason of a build-up of development. And then also CTY 1, the development is not essential in this rural location. Obviously, if members consider that it meets CTY 8 and is an exception to CTY 8, then CTY 1 would be acceptable.
Okay, thanks very much, Darren. And Brendan, you have joined us, so you have 10 minutes and the floor is now yours. Gonna put you on speaker now. There you go.
Oh, yes. Darren, could I have my first slide up, please, if you wouldn't mind? The first slide that you showed belonged to myself. No, sorry, Darren, the next one. Yes, and then I'll want the one with the green house in that plot later on. Okay, folks, the application seeks outline planning for a site for 2 infill dwellings. The application has been recommended for refusal as the plan department don't accept that the proposal complies with CTY 8 and PPS 21. If you have a peep at the map over my shoulder, the application site is located within a ribbon of development which stretches along the northern side of Fedden Road. And the ribbon of development consists of a dwelling at number 56, its detached garage, the large cladded shed that Darren has referred to, and a dwelling at number 60.
And very helpfully, and it's confirmed again by Darren, the initial officer's report confirms that the application is in keeping with the requirements of CTY 8 in terms of size, scale, siding and plot size already displayed along the frontage. The report also confirms that the dwelling and garage at 56 and the dwelling at 60 have a common frontage with Fedden Road. And the officer's report confirms that the council have no concerns regarding integration. And as Darren has alluded to, CTY 8 permits up to 2 houses in a gap site with an otherwise substantial and continuously built up frontage, provided this respects the existing development pattern along the frontage in terms of size, scale, siding and plot size. The definition of a substantial and built up frontage is a line of 3 or more buildings along a road frontage without accompanying development to the rear. So if you have a peep at my slide, let's see, you have number 56 in purple. You have the application site in red with the 2 houses, the 2 proposed houses in blue. You have the shed, which is basically the topic of discussion for the application, in green, and its plot hatched in black. And then you have number 60 hatched in blue, if I'm not mistaken. And as you will see, that's based on the up-to-date ordnance survey map, which was only purchased during the week. There are no hedges or fences running between the shed and the roadside boundary at Fedden Road. The initial report concentrates a great deal on the large shed, which is outlined green. The report concludes that the shed doesn't have a common frontage with Fedden Road. The shed sits to the rear of a small field currently in pasture. There's a small concrete apron to the eastern side of the shed to facilitate access to the roller doors on the eastern gable. The entire area between the shed and Fedden Road is a grass field. The report advises that the area between the shed and the road is part of the grass field. However, the area between the shed and the road isn't part of the grass field. It is simply a grass field with no hedges or fences running across it. The report continues to advise, as a result, while it faces the road, this building, and thus the shed the officer is referring to, does not have a common frontage to the road. And when someone uses the words "as a result" at the start of a sentence, the sentence usually follows a lengthy explanation or summary relating to a specific issue. And in this case, the officer uses the words "as a result" with absolutely no prior explanation as to why the shed, which sits in a field, doesn't have a common frontage with Fedden Road. The applicant and myself have found this to be frustrating, as the success or failure of the entire application hangs simply on whether or not the shed has a common frontage with Fedden Road. One could perhaps understand the officer's contention if there was a hedge or a fence running across the field, parallel with Fedden Road, which, if you like, separates the field into 2 plots. But in this case, there are no dividing or separating features between the shed and the hedge which runs along Fedden Road. So when does a building have a common frontage with a road? The officer's report advises correctly that a building has a frontage to a road if the plot on which it stands abuts or shares a boundary with a road. And in preparation for this, I've read a few officers' reports for infill applications in the district and noted application LA10 2021-9070 at Drumleys Road, Drumore. The officer used similar language. He said, for a building to have a road frontage, the plot on which it stands must abut or share a boundary with that road. So that's a different officer explaining the same concept using slightly different language. In the case of the shed at Fedden Road, the building sits in a field which extends to meet Fedden Road. The plot on which the shed stands or sits in therefore has a boundary with Fedden Road, and as such the shed has a common frontage with Fedden Road. Darren, if you could put my next slide up, please. This is a hypothetical situation. This is, I've basically taken the shed off the drawing and used the same footprint as number 60, rotated round slightly and plonked in the middle of the field. And if that was the existing situation, the planning department, I'm very sure, and Darren may confirm this, would have no problem with confirming that the green building has a common frontage with Fedden Road. And if the green building has a common frontage with Fedden Road, Darren would have no issue with granting permission for 2 infills. Our problem is the shed just sits slightly to the rear. So we are at a loss to understand why the shed is considered to not have a common frontage with Fedden Road. And the reason this is so important is if the shed's seen as having a common frontage with Fedden Road, the gap to be considered will be the gap between 56 and the shed, and not the entirety of the gap between 56 and 60, as Darren has alluded to. What's that? Once the officer's report incorrectly concluded that the shed doesn't form part of the frontage because the thought is that it doesn't have a common frontage, the report continues to assess the application based on the totality of the gap between 56 and 60, which Darren has alluded to. The report concludes that the entire gap between 56 and 60 can accommodate more than 2 houses, which is contrary to CTY 8. And whilst I would agree that the entire gap between 56 and 60 can accommodate more than 2 houses, I would point out that the gap that must be considered via this application is not the gap between 56 and 60. The gap that must be considered is the gap between 56 and the shed, as the shed forms part of the frontage of development. The recent Planning Committee report published on the 17th of June advises, whilst it could be argued that the applicant is seeking to fill the gap between number 56 and the cladded shed, it remains the case that the field to the east can be developed as the third site. Now I would contend that that's slightly kicking the door open, and I would say that the 17th of June report has perhaps conceded that the shed does indeed have a frontage to Fedden Road. I would also contend that the council could refuse an infill site in front of the shed, as CTY 8 prevents an infill approval with development to the rear of the site, as the shed would be behind the proposal. It would be considered as being to the rear. Secondly, Appeal 2018 A0186 at Spring Road, not that far from here in Omagh, decided in July 2019, advises that planning authorities must deal with the actual situation which is put in front of them and the actual situation on the ground, and that future applications for development, if they are submitted, must be considered against the prevailing policies at the time they are decided. The initial officer's report confirms that the application site complies with the requirements of CTY 8 in terms of size, scale, siding and plot size. So to summarise, the entire outcome of the application hinges on whether or not the shed has a common frontage with Fedden Road. And I would strongly contend that the shed has a common frontage with Fedden Road, and furthermore, there's nothing in the file to indicate why the shed doesn't have a common frontage with Fedden Road. So my final few points: how can the committee approve this application? If the committee say that the shed has a common frontage with Fedden Road, the shed will then be considered as forming part of the frontage of development, and as such, the application will be compliant with CTY 8. This will remove refusal reason 1. Given the way the second refusal reason has been constructed or worded, the second refusal reason can then be set aside as an application which complies with CTY 8 won't cause riven development, and an application which won't cause riven development won't offend the relevant criteria in CTY 14. Finally, if refusal reasons 1 and 2 are set aside, the application will be compliant with CTY 1. And I'd like to thank the councillor for allowing me, number 1, to be present in the room, and number 2, allowing me to speak in support, and I'm happy to take any questions you have. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Brendan. Have we any questions, members? The applicant is Mr. Weil. Are you there? Yes, no? Brendan, have you any knowledge if the applicant wishes to speak? Or?
Oh no, the applicant's not attending. The applicant is he doesn't have the technology.
Okay.
Plus he's driving the school bus and he didn't want to.
No, that's
grand.
That's grand. No, that's okay. Have we any questions, members? For Brendan? No. Sounds like you have explained your position very well, Brendan. Okay. We have representation now by Tom Elliott, MLA. Tom, you have 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Chair and councillors again. Brendan has obviously outlined the planning issues quite specifically. And just to say that, you know, the family of Wileys, I've known them for many years. I knew Alan's father. They're very much connected to that area and have a significant attachment to that Garvey area. Alan himself drives a school bus, something that you, Chair, will know very well, is in short supply at the moment, and very much needed within our community. And they've always been very much part of that community. I know that's not a planning reason, but it's just to say and put it in context that that's why Alan wants to live there locally and the family. Obviously, I think what Darren outlined earlier, if I'm right, and I don't want to put words in his mouth, but he was basically saying that if the application plot in itself would fit policy CTY 8, the only contention is if the cladded shed is accepted as road frontage. So that the plot itself, I think, and when we're talking about very small margins here, and small margins, as we all know, decide games, and I think that's what you're here as councillors for. Look, if this was a straightforward decision, it wouldn't be here in front of you. So there is a bit of ambiguity around it, and I'm not so sure that planners are absolutely convinced of their argument that that shed does not form road frontage, and that it shouldn't be accepted within the CTY policy, CTY 8 policy, of 2 infill sites. There are no fences or boundaries in front of that cladded shed, so it does basically form a road frontage onto Feddens Road. I think that what we need to do is look at this application in itself without having to consider what might come in the future and circumspect as to what that might bring. This application should stand on its own right. I believe it fits the policy. It's a fine line. I do accept that. It's one of those that is on the margins. But again, I think it's one of those that the benefit of the doubt here should be given to the applicant and to the local person who's doing a lot for the local community and his family. So I just want to say I believe it does fit the. There's any chance of you approved that and it was outside the policy. I think it does fit well within that policy context, Chairman, and thank you again.
Okay, thank you, Tom. Okay, Darren?
Yeah, just to come back on a few issues there. First of all, members, I confirm that planners are absolutely convinced about the recommendations within the report and the issues raised in it. So there's no doubt from our minds and what we're saying here in terms of the policy context, planning appeals, judicial reviews, etc., all taken in the round and taken into consideration on those. So I think for me, members, the issue is less about whether this building is a common frontage to more of a planning judgment and looking at the application in itself. And if I go back to my plan that I showed you, but I just want to show you the image. That's the cladded shed, and the agent has made the point that in his view it has a common frontage to the road. So you can see it's a green field, and past experience with this committee has formed the view that buildings where the garden area or they're sitting in the field and there's no relationship with the road, or there's something in between the building and the road, that means the buildings don't have a common frontage to the road. I don't know, but I can see a fence along the back of that shed. It looks like a post and wire fence along there in that image. So going on a consistent approach with other applications, this building would not have a common frontage to the public road, and that would be consistent with a lot of other applications that have come before you, and other applicants have made the case on it. But I think, as I say, members, the critical issue for me is as I said, looking at the application on itself, and as the agent said, deal with the actual situation. So what have we on the ground? You have number 56, you have your application site, and then you have the cladded shed, which is a red star. Whether or not you're filling in between number 56 and the cladded shed or not, there's room there for a third house along that road frontage, creating a line of 3 buildings. The policy is designed to allow the infilling of small gaps up to a maximum of 2 houses in a substantially built up frontage. And that image to me really is very, very comparable to one we had previously at this committee, where the applicant was unsuccessful, in that there's room for 3 houses along there. Whether or not they apply for it in the future in that yellow star is neither here nor there. You have to plan the orderly and consistent development of land. In this case, there's room for 2 on our application site. There's room for another one in front of that cladded shed, which is 3.
Okay, members. No, you can't. No, you've made your presentation. You've got your time, Brendan. You can't, Brendan. I'm moving to members. Have we any questions, or John?
Obviously, as outlined both by both speakers on behalf of the applicant, this shed is the key thing. The fact that there's a lane or a roadway up directly from the road to that shed, does that not integrate that shed onto the road as such to say, from one of those pictures, is it clearly that there is a lane leads straight from the road to that shed? And if they say there is no fence, that the shed's sitting in that field, does that not then give it that it has frontage onto the road?
Yeah. The that situation, the same members, has been before us on many other applications where you'd have a laneway or an access coming in, and you'd have the laneway running down to the building, and then between the building and the road, there's a green grass field. And whether there's a fence between that building and the road, or there's just a grass field or whatever, it's not part of the house. It's not part of the domestic curtilage, or it's not part of the agricultural building, only down to the public road. So as I say, just being consistent with all the other applications that we've had here, that would not mean that it has a common frontage to the road. But as I say, members, the critical thing is to look at the wider picture here. The planning policy is written to allow the infilling of small gaps between buildings. And in this site here, this the frontage along there, there's room for 3 new buildings. So whether or not the Red Star has a common frontage to the road is almost a side issue, because there's room for 3 along that road frontage. And it's very difficult to get past that argument. And as I said before, we've had this at the previous application, previous committee meeting, where there was room for 3. So it is very comparable to other applications. So this is a consistent approach from planning officers. In terms of what the frontage to the road means, is a consistent thing. The agent referred to it as well. All planners are very familiar with it. A building has a frontage to a road if the plot on which it stands abuts or shares a boundary with the road. So the plot in which it stands, is what you're looking at. And as I say, there's a green field between that cladded shed and the road. Whether or not there's a fence there or not, it's almost not that relevant. The critical thing here is you have room for 3. If that cladded shed was sitting up where that blue square is, we wouldn't be here today.
Okay. Are we any other questions? If not, I'm looking for a decision. Tommy.
Margaret Caherly, maybe in the interest of brevity, I'll speak. Unfortunately, as Tom Elliott alluded to there, this wouldn't be before us if it was a straightforward proposal. But I'm afraid I have to go with Darren's advice on this issue, and I propose that we go along with the officer's recommendation. It's regrettable, but unfortunately we have to stick to standard policy if we can't.
Thank you. Have a seconder? Anthony?
Thanks, Chair. And I know I don't like to do this. It's regrettable because I would be always fighting for a house being built in rural areas, and especially on farms.
Just maybe use the mic a wee bit better.
Sorry, Chair. And as I said, I don't like having to do this, but we have to kind of go with the plans. I don't like refusing anybody, especially farmers or anybody building in the rural area. But it's a tricky one about the shed now. She's up in the corner of the field and it hasn't really much frontage, so I'll second Tommy's proposal.
Okay, thank you, Anthony. I have it proposed and seconded to uphold the officer's decision. Are we all agreed? Okay, I'm not seeing any dissension, so thank you all. Thank you, Brendan.
Sorry, members. So application LA 10 2022-0463, the recommendation then was to refuse planning permission, and it's for 3 reasons. Members have refused the application for those 3 reasons.
Okay, members. Okay, we're moving on to point 6, the notice schedule of planning decision issued in May. That's paper C. Paul?
Yep, thanks, Chair. And paper just for noting members, but I would like to point out just the amount of applications that was issued in May, 192 applications, and that is quite a lot in comparison to other months. And I suppose just to acknowledge the hard work of Darren and all the team, and also the administrative staff as we drive these sort of clear files and clear the backlog. And it is a good sign, and we're going in the right direction. So thanks.
Robert?
Yeah, on the back of that comment, but before I propose noting, I think it's interesting to note again that there are only 5 refusals. I think that backstory is hopefully that a lot of agents and applicants are ensuring their applications are policy compliant, and that the ones do come basically onto the delegated list for refusal are those ones, as we have seen today, that are very, very close, very, very fine, and take a lot of debate, and it just depends what way they fall. And I think it's credit to our officers that they're actually processing so many and getting them through, and that's across a variety. And I think probably, I don't want to pat ourselves on the back, but on this occasion, it's a collective we. I think we interrogate, we drill into, and we don't lightly come to decisions in the committee. We do so after thorough dialogue. And again, when there is a refusal and we put a refusal through, it's because we've looked at it. So I propose noting and congratulate the officers for all the hard work they do. Thank you.
Cheers, Robert. Earl?
Yep. Thank you, Chair. I want to congratulate our officers also in the way that they carry out their work on a day-to-day basis. And as Councillor Irvine has really referred to, it's and I said that myself earlier in the meeting, it's not our interest to refuse for the sake of it. So we come up and there is a good debate in each one of them when it comes here. So I want to second the recommendation to note at this stage, Chair.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Earl. Tommy?
Hi, Gurmugget. Carly, thanks again, Chair, and again, just to come in to congratulate our staff that have put nearly twice as many as average, I believe, in the last month or so, and I think that's to be commended. It does fly in the face of some of the criticism that planning issues have received across the 6 counties where we're all being accused of not fit for purpose, and I think we're holding up our own in Fermanagh and Omagh district, and congratulations to all the staff, and I'll refrain from acknowledging, like Robert, that maybe some of us down to ourselves, you know. But congratulations to all the staff that do the hard work.
Josephine.
Thank you, Chair. And just to add my word of thanks and appreciation to our planning officers and planning team for dealing with what is really a very considerable and onerous workload over the past month and more. And I think I also would like to acknowledge the very sound advice that we get from our planning officers in the course of the planning committee hearings. You know, as council members, we face very difficult and often finely balanced decisions, and we do rely very heavily on the expert advice of our expert and professional planners. So I want to record my appreciation of that, Chair. Thank you.
Thanks, Josephine. Okay, members, we're moving on to note to report on planning enforcement in May, and that's paper D.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. And members, report again is just for noting, and just in terms of activity, again, quite a lot of activity in terms of enforcement team. 6 notices served in May, and they're set out there within the report. Just in terms of caseload update, 35 enforcement cases were closed, with 33 new cases opened. And again, the details are set out within the report. So nothing further to add to that. Thanks, Chair.
Well, Earl.
Yeah, thank you again, Chair. Thanks, Chair officers. And I want to propose the recommendation that we note the report.
Okay, thank you. Robert?
So, Chair, I'll second that proposal. Thank you.
Okay, members. We'll move along to paper E to note annual report on live planning enforcement caseload.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. And members, this is an annual report on the current planning enforcement caseload. It's a report that members had requested be brought before them. Looking at the details within the report then, members, we have a total of 183 live cases. And you can see in paragraph 2.1 there, that table, they're broken down into the various stages. What's probably most relevant to members is the 67 applications which are currently under consideration or investigation. And paragraph 2.2 then breaks that down further in terms of that 67 files, 27 of which are out of target and 40 which are in target. So out of target files under investigation is 14.7% of the total live cases. And members, just to point out in terms of enforcement, whilst there's a statutory target, a lot of the investigations, take a bit of time. They investigate, and so we're not driven to achieve the target. We're driven to achieve the best possible outcome in terms of enforcement case. So that's a summary, members, and happy to take any queries. Thanks, Chair.
Robert?
Yeah, thanks, Tom. It would be useful, I propose noting, all right, Paul, but it would be useful from a historical point of view if maybe we go back to the start of the handover of planning to see what the in-year applications were and the in-year enforcements were, just to see if there's a trend. Because it would be useful from a total application point of view just to see where the workload is going. And then obviously with regard to enforcement, whether that directly relates to in-year or live files. It's just, I'm not sure whether that's up or down. We get it on a monthly basis, but that's just pulling statistics out, but it gives, I think, a better view. But happy to propose noting, Tom. Thank you.
Sure. Okay, are we all agreed to note? Thank you. Moving on to paper F, and that's to note the update report on planning appeals.
Okay, members, so paper F then, and it's a planning appeal update for May 22. So there was 2 appeal decisions in May, and the first one there is Council Reference LA 10 2021 0061. In that appeal, the application was refused by officers under delegated authority. So the decision by the Commissioner then, she had considered the report and accepted the analysis of the Commissioner and their recommendation that the appeal should fall or fail, and the appeal was dismissed there on the 4th of May 2022. So in terms of the key issues then, in terms of the decision, the Commissioner found that the appeal site is not a gap within an otherwise substantial and continuously built up frontage. And also just of note, in terms of policy CTY 2A, there was a lay-by picnic area and T-junction nearby, but the Commission did not determine that these amounted to a focal point. And there was no applications for costs as part of that appeal. So just moving on then, members, the appeal number 2. This was a dwelling and domestic garage, planning reference LA 10 2020 1065 outline application. Again, this application was refused by officers under delegated authority. And the decision by the Commission, who considered the Commissioner's report, accepted her analysis of the issue and recommendation that the appeal should be sustained or allowed. So the Commission decided that a modest dwelling and garage would not appear a prominent feature in the landscape and would have sufficient enclosure created by the existing roadside hedge, which can be retained by condition, and the buildings would also give a backdrop. So the appeal was sustained and was subject to 8 planning conditions. Again, there were no costs awarded as part of that appeal. And members obviously will take the learning away from that Commissioner's decision. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, we're noting. Okay, moving along to item 10, to consider report and revision of the Statement of Community Involvement, paper G.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So this paper follows on from the discussion and decision at the Regeneration and Community Committee earlier this month, when we agreed to a change to the governance model for the local policies plan and noted that this would require an update to the Statement of Community Involvement. So the appendix attached provides the updated Statement of Community Involvement using track changes, which outlines the proposed amendments in relation to the governance arrangements, and also takes out a piece that we had inserted previously around COVID-19 arrangements as well. The next steps then are that this must be approved by a resolution of the council, so it will be brought to P&R in terms of the overall changes to the constitution, and also that there's a need to make a copy available for inspection for a period of time and to give notice by local advertisement so that the wider public can view the potential changes. So the recommendation is that members agree the content of the revised Statement of Community Involvement is set out in Appendix 1.
Okay, have a proposer and seconder. Josephine Nerl, thank you. We all agreed? Okay. Moving on to correspondence then. This is from Derry and Strabane District Council regarding Derry City and Strabane District Council Local Development Plan.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. So members, this is just a notification from Derry and Strabane District Council regarding their LDP, and it'll be familiar to some members that's been involved in the LDP process. So just before independent examination then, submit your documents to DFI, who review them prior to them being submitted to the PAC. So basically that's the stage Derry and Strabane District Council are at. and as a neighbouring council and probably a council that has commented on their plan, we're being just kept up to speed with the process. Thanks.
Okay, that's for noting. Moving on to 12 then, to receive a verbal update on application LA 10 2021 1283, and that's the canoe steps leading to the Belcoo River. If that is the terminology to be used.
Okay, members, so I think there was a query raised just in relation to this application. The reference was LA 10 2021 1283 is a full application. So the site address or the location of the application was described as 50 metres southeast of 47 Main Street, Belcoo, East Belcoo. So in terms of planning law and legislation and practice, the key bit of information for advising the public on the location of the development is the site address. So that's what it was described as the site address. The description of the application then, when you go on down to the next bit there, you can see it was described as a canoe landing steps to Belcoo River, and that was amended following the discussion at the committee. So it was approved as it was re-advertised saying canoe landing steps to Belcoo River. So the first bit of the information in terms of the advertisement and notifying people so they know where it is, that's the address that was advertised. So 50 metres southeast of 47 Main Street, Belcoo, East Belcoo. And you can see there from the What's My Address app, number 47 there, Main Street is identified. And our site then is 50 metres southeast of that. So the site address was entirely accurate and there's no debate over that. In terms then of the description, go back to that. So canoe landing steps to Belcoo River. This is the aerial photograph taken off the Google images, and various other images too are all the same. And you can see it's described as Belcoo River in it. For me as well, the NIA Natural Environment Map Viewer is something that I would rely on for accuracy. And it's shown as Belcoo River. You can see there in Belcoo Bridge as well, with the site then the position of the yellow star. So for me, the site address is entirely accurate. The description of the application then, going on the basis of information available to planning officers and the council, is accurate. Whether there's a different name locally would be a local name that wouldn't affect the validity of the application or the decision that's been made by this council.
Okay, members, I think that conclusively deals with that issue. So we'll note that, and we'll move on to, can we have that proposed and seconded? Alan and Robert, all agreed there, members? Thank you. And we move on to point 13, and that's any urgent or relevant business. I haven't been notified of any. So
Chair, if I could maybe just remind members that there's a workshop on Friday afternoon in relation to information regarding the planning portal and our improvements that we're hoping to make.
okay, so that's one for your diary. Okay, we're going to move now with your agreement to part 2, confidential matters and matters exempt from publication. Proposed by Tommy, seconded by Earl. Okay, we're back online now. And Paul,
Chair, so
Kim?
during
Sorry.
confidential business, members considered matters arising from the confidential minutes of the 21st of April and of 18th May, and there were no matters arising.
Okay. Thank you, Josephine, and seconded by Earl. Okay, members, that concludes the meeting. So thank you very much for your cooperation and safe home. And thank you for those that have joined us online.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you.
Traveling to do.
Thank you. Bye. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.